Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Elizabeth Morrison, but everyone calls me Beth. I've been a park ranger at Monongahela National Forest for 12 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything these mountains could throw at me. Rock slides, bear attacks, lost hikers, climbing accidents, you name it, I've dealt with it. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for what started happening at Seneca Rocks last October. I should probably tell you a bit about myself first. I'm 34, single mom to twin boys named Jake and Sam. They're 12 now, getting to that age where they think they're invincible. Before I became a ranger, I was a geology professor at West Virginia University. That changed when my husband died in a climbing accident 8 years ago. After that, I couldn't stand being in a classroom anymore. I needed to be outside, in the mountains, helping people instead of just talking about rocks. Seneca Rocks is special, even by West Virginia standards. It's this massive wall of quartzite that shoots straight up from the valley floor. About 900 feet of solid stone that looks like God took a giant knife and sliced it clean. Rock climbers come from all over the country to test themselves against those walls. It's technical climbing, the kind that separates the weekend warriors from the real deal. The local Seneca tribe always said the rocks were sacred. They called them crying stones and had all sorts of stories about spirits living in the cliff face. When German settlers came through in the 1700s, they reported hearing screams coming from the rocks at night, banshee wails that would make your blood freeze. Most folks figured it was just wind through the cracks, or maybe mountain lions. I never bought into that stuff. Mountains don't hunt people, people make fatal mistakes. In my 12 years here, I've led 89 successful rescues, 15 of them right off Seneca Rocks. I know every route, every handhold, every loose piece of stone that might give way. I was the first woman to lead the mountain rescue unit, and I've free-climbed routes that some guys wouldn't touch with a 10-foot rope. But there's something you need to understand about Seneca Rocks. The death rate there is weird. Since the 1,960 seconds, 23 climbers have died on those walls. That might not sound like much, but when you consider that it's actually one of the safer climbing spots in the state, good rock, well-established routes, great sightlines, it makes you wonder. The thing is, most of those deaths happened to experienced climbers, not beginners who bit off more than they could chew, but guides and instructors who knew what they were doing. They'd be found in impossible positions, like they'd just let go of the wall for no reason. The official reports always listed equipment failure or climber error, but I'd examined the gear. There was never anything wrong with it. My boys have been asking me to teach them how to climb. Every weekend, it's, "Mom, when can we go up the rocks? Mom, you promised you'd show us." I keep putting them off. It's not that I don't trust my skills. I could teach them to climb safely. It's something else. Something I can't quite put my finger on. Call it mother's instinction, but something about those rocks has always felt watchful. The morning everything changed started like any other. I was at the ranger station, going through incident reports and checking weather conditions. It was a perfect October day, crisp air, clear skies, the kind of day that brings climbers out in droves. My radio crackled to life around 8 a.m. "Beth, we need you at Seneca Rocks immediately." It was Jim Patterson, the park superintendent. His voice was tight, stressed. "We've got a situation with a climber." "What kind of situation?" I grabbed my rescue gear and headed for the door. "Just get here, fast." The drive to Seneca Rocks takes about 20 minutes from the station. All the way there, I'm thinking about what I might find. Broken bones, maybe a heart attack, probably someone stuck on a ledge. I've seen it all before. I kept telling myself it was just another rescue, another day at the office. I was wrong. When I pulled up to the base of Seneca Rocks, there were already 3 vehicles there: Jim's truck, a county sheriff's car, and an ambulance. That was unusual. For a simple rescue, we'd call in medical support after we got the climber down. Having them there waiting meant someone was already dead. Jim met me at the trailhead. He's been superintendent for 15 years, and I'd never seen him look this shaken. "What have we got?" I asked, pulling my gear bag from the truck. Michael Torres? He said. 38 years old, climbing guide from Colorado. Been climbing for 20 years, worked rescue in Rocky Mountain National Park. Found him about an hour ago. I knew that name. Torres was featured in climbing magazines, had first ascents all over the world. Not exactly the type to make a rookie mistake. Where is he? Jim pointed up at the cliff face. About 300 feet up, on Easy Street. I looked up and felt my stomach drop. Easy Street is exactly what it sounds like, a 5.4 route that most experienced climbers could do blindfolded. It's the kind of climb you'd take your grandmother on, if your grandmother happened to be into rock climbing. Equipment failure? I asked. That's what we need you to figure out. I got my binoculars and scanned the wall. At first, I didn't see anything unusual. Then I spotted him. Torres was hanging about 15 feet left of the normal route, and something was very wrong with the picture. He looked like he was standing on the wall, not hanging from it. His body was pressed against the rock face in a position that defied physics. How's he positioned like that? I muttered. That's what we'd like to know, Jim said. Beth, there's something else. The way we found him, his face. What about his face? You'll see when you get up there. Just prepare yourself. I'd been expecting this to be routine, but Jim's tone made me realize this was going to be anything but. I spent the next 30 minutes setting up my rappel system, double-checking every piece of gear. When you're going down a 900-foot cliff face, you don't cut corners. The climb up to Torres took me about 40 minutes. As I got closer, I could see why Jim had looked so disturbed. Torres wasn't hanging from his rope. He was standing against the wall like it was flat ground. His climbing harness was empty, no rope attached. But that wasn't the worst part. His face was frozen in an expression of absolute terror. Eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. I've seen climbing accident victims before, and they usually look peaceful, like they just went to sleep. This was different. This was the face of someone who had seen something that scared him to death, literally. I secured myself to the wall and started examining the scene. Torres's rope was cut clean through, about 20 feet below where he hung. I followed it down and found the other end tied off at a belay station. The cut was surgical, too clean to be from falling rock, too precise to be accidental. But here's what really bothered me. There were no sharp edges anywhere near that rope. Seneca Rocks is quartzite, smooth as glass in most places. What could have cut through 11mm dynamic rope that cleanly? I photographed everything, took measurements, examined his gear piece by piece. His climbing shoes showed wear patterns that didn't make sense, like he'd been climbing the same 10-foot section over and over again. The rubber was worn down to nothing in specific spots, but the rest of the soles looked almost new. That's when I heard it. A sound like crying, coming from inside the rock face itself. Faint at first, like a child sobbing somewhere, far away. I pressed my ear to the stone and felt vibrations, as if something large was moving around inside the mountain. I keyed my radio. Jim, do you copy? Static answered me. I tried again. More static, but underneath it, I could swear I heard voices. Multiple voices, all talking at once, too faint to make out words. I looked down at the base of the cliff and saw Jim waving at me. I waved back, then pointed to my radio and shook my head. He seemed to understand that communications were down. The crying sound got louder. I finished documenting the scene as quickly as I could and started my descent. Every few feet, I'd stop and listen. The crying would fade, then come back stronger. By the time I was halfway down, it sounded like a whole nursery school was trapped inside the mountain. But there was something familiar about those voices, something that made my blood run cold. They sounded like my boys. I rappelled the rest of the way down as fast as safety would allow. When I hit the ground, Jim was waiting with a concerned expression. Radio problems? He asked. Yeah, nothing but static. I didn't mention the voices. Not yet. Jim, we need to get a coroner up there and process this scene properly. And I want to check something. What? I want to see if anyone else has reported hearing voices near the rocks. Jim raised an eyebrow but didn't question it. He'd learned to trust my instincts over the years. We spent the rest of the day getting Torres's body down and documenting everything. The coroner, Dr. Sarah Chen, was just as puzzled as I was. No obvious cause of death, she told me as they loaded the body into the ambulance. We'll know more after the autopsy, but this looks like he died of fright, literally. Heart stopped from pure terror. Any idea what could cause that? In a 38-year-old athlete with perfect cardiovascular health? No. That night, I drove home to my boys with more questions than answers. Torres was an expert climber who had died on an easy route in an impossible position with no equipment failure. And I'd heard crying coming from inside solid rock. I tucked Jake and Sam into bed and sat in my kitchen, staring at photos of the scene. Something was very wrong at Seneca Rocks, and I had a feeling Michael Torres was just the beginning. 3 days later, we had 2 more deaths. The first was Rebecca Walsh, a climbing instructor from Virginia, found at dawn on a route called Banana, which is about as challenging as its name suggests. Like Torres, she was positioned impossibly on the wall, and like Torres, her face showed that same expression of pure terror. The second was David Kim, a local guide who'd been climbing Seneca Rocks for 15 years. He knew those routes better than anyone. We found him at the base of the cliff with no climbing gear on at all. Security footage from the visitor center showed him walking to the rocks at 3 a.m, climbing the wall with his bare hands. The footage was grainy, but you could see him moving up the rock face like gravity didn't apply to him. No ropes, no harness, just climbing straight up 900 feet of vertical stone. He made it about halfway before falling. Equipment malfunction? Jim asked when we reviewed the footage. Jim, look at this. I rewound the tape. He's not using any equipment, and look at the way he's moving. We watched David's figure on the screen. His movements were jerky, unnatural, like someone was pulling his arms and legs with invisible strings. It's like he's not in control of his own body, I said. After the third death, the FBI got involved. Agent Lisa Rodriguez arrived from the Charleston field office with a team of investigators. They set up a command post at the visitor center and started treating the climbing area like a crime scene. We're looking at the possibility of a serial killer targeting climbers, Rodriguez told me during our first briefing. Someone who knows enough about climbing to sabotage equipment and make deaths look accidental. I wanted to believe that. A human killer I could understand, could fight, could catch. But the evidence didn't support it. Agent Rodriguez, I've examined all the gear. There's no sabotage. And how do you explain David Kim climbing without equipment? Drugs? Maybe. Hallucination. We've seen PCP make people think they can fly. But David's toxicology came back clean. All 3 victims were clean. That's when things got personal. I was at home, helping Jake with his math homework, when Sam came running into the kitchen. Mom, there's something weird outside. I looked out the window and saw my neighbor's dog, Rex, standing in our yard. Rex was a big German shepherd, fearless around everything from bears to thunderstorms. But right now, he was cowering, whimpering, staring up at something I couldn't see. What's he looking at? Jake asked. I followed Rex's gaze upward and felt my heart stop. There, carved into the trunk of the big oak tree in our backyard, were letters. Fresh cuts in the bark, still weeping sap. EM was here. My initials, Elizabeth Morrison. Boys, go inside, now. But Mom, now. I examined the carving while they went inside. The cuts were deep, made with something sharp and precise. But here's what made my hands shake. Those letters were carved 8 feet off the ground. I'd need a ladder to reach that high, and I sure as hell hadn't carved my own initials in my own tree. I called Jim and had him send a deputy to take photos. While we waited, I checked every window and door in the house. Everything was locked, no signs of forced entry. Whoever had done this had been in my yard while I was inside with my kids. The deputy, Tommy Valdez, was a good kid, but clearly out of his depth. Any idea who might have done this, Beth? Someone who knows where I live and wants to scare me. I touched the bark around the letters. It was warm, like the tree had a fever. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking on the boys, making sure their windows were locked, listening for sounds that didn't belong. Around 2 a.m., I heard it again, that crying sound, but this time it was coming from outside. I looked out my bedroom window and saw a figure standing at the edge of my property. Tall, impossibly tall, and perfectly still. At first I thought it was a person, but as my eyes adjusted, I realized the proportions were all wrong. Too tall, arms too long, standing in a way that no human being could stand. I grabbed my binoculars and focused on the figure. What I saw made me question my own sanity. It looked like it was made of stone, gray-brown quartzite, the same color as Seneca rocks. It stood 12 feet tall, with eyes that glowed amber in the darkness, and it was looking directly at my house. I blinked, and it was gone. The next morning, I found footprints in my yard. Not human footprints, these were huge, deep impressions in the hard ground. Each print was the size of a dinner plate, with what looked like claw marks at the front. I took photos and measurements, then called Agent Rodriguez. "Someone's stalking me," I told her. "They carved my initials in my tree and left tracks in my yard." "We'll post a patrol car tonight," she said. "In the meantime, I need you to stay focused on the investigation. We've got another team coming in from Quantico." But I was losing focus. How could I concentrate on catching a killer when something was hunting my family? That afternoon, I got a call from the school. Both boys had been found wandering around the playground during lunch, staring up at the sky. When teachers asked what they were looking at, they said they heard their mom calling for help. I picked them up early and drove straight to my mother's house in Morgantown, 60 miles away. "Mom, I need you to watch the boys for a few days." "What's wrong, honey? You look terrible." I almost told her everything, about the voices in the rocks, about the impossible deaths, about the thing I'd seen in my yard. Instead, I just said, "Work stuff. It might be dangerous." Jake and Sam protested, but I was firm. They were staying with Grandma until this was over. Driving back to Seneca Rocks that evening, I made a decision. Whatever was happening, it was connected to those cliffs, and if it wanted me, it could have me. But it wasn't getting my boys. I just didn't realize that by leaving them behind, I was walking straight into its trap. The next morning, I met with Dr. Samuel Reeves, the park's archaeologist. Sam was a thin, nervous man who spent most of his time cataloging old Native American sites. But he'd been acting strange since the deaths started, jumpy and distracted. "Beth, I need to show you something," he said. "But you have to. Promise me you won't think I've lost my mind." After this week, Sam, nothing would surprise me. He led me to a section of cliff face I'd climbed dozens of times. But as we got closer, I could see something that hadn't been there before. About 200 feet up, carved into the stone, were symbols. Fresh symbols, like someone had just finished chiseling them. "Those weren't there last week," I said. "I know. They appeared the same night Michael Torres died." I got my binoculars and studied the markings. They looked like some kind of Native American petroglyphs, but the stone around them was lighter, newer. "Sam, how is that possible? That section of wall is vertical, no handholds, no way to access it without technical climbing gear. That's what I've been trying to figure out." He pulled out a folder thick with papers. "I've been researching Seneca tribal history, and I found something. There's a legend about a shaman who volunteered to become one with the rocks, to guard them forever." "One with the rocks?" According to the stories, he underwent some kind of ritual that transformed him into a stone guardian. He was supposed to protect the sacred burial sites from desecration. I thought about the crying I'd heard, about the figure in my yard. "Sam, where exactly are these burial sites?" "That's the problem. The entrance was sealed over 200 years ago. But if I'm reading these old maps correctly..." He spread out a hand-drawn chart covered in Seneca symbols. "It should be right behind the main cliff face." "Behind it? How?" "Cave system. The whole mountain is riddled with limestone caves." We spent the next hour searching the base of the cliffs. It was Sam who found it a narrow crack in the rock face, partially hidden by fallen boulders. The opening was just wide enough for a person to squeeze through sideways. "Beth, I think this is it." I shined my flashlight into the crack and felt cold air, flowing out. There was definitely a cave system back there. "We need to report this to Jim before we..." That's when I heard them. Voices, calling my name. Not the crying this time, but actual voices. Male voices. "Mom, Mom, help us." Jake and Sam, my boys, were supposed to be safe at Grandma's house, 60 miles away, but I could hear them screaming for help from inside the mountain. "Beth, wait." Sam grabbed my arm as I headed for the cave entrance. "You can't go in there alone. Those are my boys." "Beth, Your boys are at your mother's house. Whatever's in there, it's not them." But I could hear them crying, begging for help. Every maternal instinct I had was screaming at me to get into that cave and save my children. I squeezed through the opening with Sam right behind me. Our flashlights revealed a narrow passage that opened into a larger chamber about 50 feet in. The air was cold and smelled like old bones. "Mom, we're back here. Hurry!" The voices were coming from deeper in the cave. I moved as fast as the narrow passage would allow, following the sound of my boys calling for help. The passage opened into a large, circular chamber. Our lights revealed something that made Sam gasp and take a step backward. Dozens of skeletons arranged in a perfect circle, all facing inward toward the center of the chamber. They were old, ancient, but preserved by the dry cave air. In the center of the circle was a raised stone platform, and on that platform was something that used to be human. It was a mummified figure wearing a mask made of carved stone. The mask was beautiful, intricate, depicting a face that was half human and half mountain. But what caught my attention were the eyes. The eye holes in the mask glowed with the same amber light I'd seen in my yard. "The Guardian," Sam whispered. "Mom, help us. We're trapped." The voices were coming from the mummy, from the thing on the platform. As we watched, the figure began to move. Slowly, like something that had been asleep for centuries. It sat up, turned its head toward us, and spoke in a voice that sounded like grinding stone. "You have disturbed the sacred rest." But underneath that voice, I could still hear my boys crying. "Where are my children?" I demanded. "The children are safe, but you have allowed desecration. Strangers climb the sacred walls, disturb the peace of the dead. They must be stopped." The thing stood up, and I realized it was huge, at least 12 feet tall, made of stone and bone, and something else I couldn't identify. When it moved, I could hear rock grinding against rock. "The climbing deaths," I said. "That was you. I protect what must be protected, but still they come, still they climb, still they disturb. Those were innocent people. No one is innocent who defiles sacred ground." The creature stepped down from the platform, and I saw that its feet were exactly the same, size as the prints in my yard. "But you understand," it said. "You respect the mountain. You could help me. Help you kill people. Help me protect the sacred places. Make the climbers understand that some stones should not be touched." I thought about all those deaths, all those terrified faces. "I won't help you murder anyone." The thing's amber eyes flared brighter. "Then you are like the others. You must be removed." It raised one massive stone arm, and I saw that its fingers ended in sharp points. The same points that had carved my initials in the tree. The same points that had cut Torres's rope. I grabbed Sam's arm and ran. Behind us, the creature let out a sound that was part roar, part avalanche. The whole cave system shook, and I could hear rocks falling somewhere in the darkness. We made it to the entrance, just as the passage behind us collapsed. Sam squeezed through the crack first, then helped pull me out. We ran toward the visitor center, but before we'd gone 50 yards, I heard that grinding voice again. "You cannot escape the mountain, Elizabeth Morrison." I turned around and saw the creature emerging from the cliff face itself. Not from the cave entrance, but from the solid rock wall. It flowed out of the stone like water, reforming into its 12-foot shape. "Run," I told Sam. "Get to the radio. Call for backup. What about you? Someone needs to face this thing." The stone screamer stepped fully out of the cliff and began walking toward me. Each step left deep prints in the hard ground. "You will join the others," it said. "You will climb the sacred walls one last time." I felt something strange happening to my legs. They were moving without my permission, carrying me toward the base of Seneca Rocks. I was going to climb, just like David Kim had. And just like David Kim, I was going to fall. I fought against the compulsion to climb, but my legs kept moving toward the cliff face. The stone screamer was controlling me somehow, and I could feel its will pressing against mine like a physical weight. 20 feet from the base of the rocks, I remembered something Sam had said about the Guardian protecting sacred burial sites. All the climbing deaths had happened on routes that went near the cave system. The creature wasn't killing for sport, it was protecting something specific. "Wait," I shouted. "I understand what you're protecting." The compulsion stopped. I could move my legs again. The burial chamber, I said. You're guarding the burial chamber, but the climbers don't know it's there. They don't know they're disturbing sacred ground. The stone screamer tilted its massive head. They climb the crying stones. They drive metal into sacred rock. They do not listen. Because no one told them. The entrance has been sealed for 200 years. How are they supposed to know? For the first time, the creature seemed uncertain. If there was a way to make them understand, I continued, to make them respect the sacred areas without killing them, would you consider it? The dead must be protected. Yes, but killing innocent people isn't protection, it's murder. There has to be another way. I pulled out my radio and hoped Sam had reached the visitor center. Sam, do you copy? Beth, are you okay? I called for backup. Cancel the backup. I need you to contact the Seneca Nation Cultural Center. Tell them we've found the lost burial chamber. Beth, what are you doing? Something I should have done years ago. I looked up at the stone screamer. Your people have descendants. They remember the old ways. What if we worked with them to establish proper protection for this site? The creature's amber eyes dimmed slightly. The living children of my people? Yes. They could teach climbers about the sacred areas, establish proper ceremonies, make sure the burial chamber is respected. I keyed. The radio again. Sam, I also need you to call Jim. Tell him we're closing Seneca Rocks to climbing until further notice. Beth, you can't just... I'm the lead rescue coordinator. If I say it's unsafe, it's unsafe. The stone screamer stepped closer. You would stop the desecration? I would stop the accidental desecration. People who knowingly disrespect sacred sites. Well, that's up to you and your people's descendants to decide. The creature was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice was softer, less like grinding stone. You offer respect. I offer partnership. Your job is to protect the dead. Mine is to protect the living. Maybe we can do both. The stone screamer looked up at the cliff face, then back at me. The children you heard, they were the voices of the buried ones. They cry out when their rest is disturbed. The children in the chamber? Many children. Families. An entire band buried together after the winter. Thickness came. I thought about my own boys, safe at Grandma's house. They deserve peace. Yes. The creature raised one massive hand and I tensed, thinking it might strike me. Instead, it touched the cliff face, and I watched the rock reshape itself. Handholds appeared, creating an easy path to the cave entrance. Show your people's children the sacred place, it said. Teach them to listen for the crying stones. Over the next 3 months, we worked with the Seneca Nation to establish new protocols for Seneca Rocks. Before any climbing permits were issued, visitors had to attend a cultural awareness session led by tribal historians. Sacred areas were clearly marked and off-limits. Traditional blessing ceremonies were performed at the beginning of each climbing season. The climbing accident rate dropped to 0. I still see the stone screamer sometimes, usually at dawn or dusk. It watches the climbers, but doesn't interfere as long as they follow the new rules. A few people have tried to climb the restricted areas anyway. They don't stay long. Something about the way the rock feels under their hands, or the voices they hear calling from inside the mountain, convinces them to find a different route. My hearing never fully recovered from that sonic attack in the cave. I have to wear hearing aids now, and sometimes I catch voices that aren't there, or at least aren't supposed to be there. My boys ask about it sometimes, why Mom went partially deaf at work that day. I tell them the mountain spoke to me, and I listened. The case officially remains unsolved. Agent Rodriguez filed a report about environmental factors and atmospheric pressure changes that might cause climber disorientation. The FBI moved on to other cases. The climbing deaths were attributed to an unusually dangerous period that had passed. Only Sam and I know the truth, and sometimes, late at night when I'm lying in bed, I wonder how many other places like Seneca Rocks are out there. How many other guardians are watching, waiting, protecting things that the modern world doesn't understand or respect? Last week, I got a call from a ranger in Colorado. They're having problems at a climbing area called Devil's Tower. Experienced climbers found dead in impossible positions, no equipment failure, faces frozen in terror. Have you ever dealt with anything like this? The ranger asked. I looked out my window at Seneca Rocks, where the first light of dawn was hitting the cliff face. For just a moment, I could see a tall figure standing motionless against the stone, watching over the sacred burial ground. Yeah, I told the Colorado Ranger. I might be able to help, because here's what I learned that day in the cave. The world is bigger and stranger than we want to admit. There are guardians in the mountains, spirits in the stones, and voices in the wind that have been trying to tell us something for centuries. The question isn't whether these things exist. The question is whether we're finally ready to listen. My name is Marcus Gallagher, but everyone calls me Mark. I've been a park ranger here in the Great Smoky Mountains for 15 years now. Seen just about everything these old peaks can throw at you. Black bears getting into campsites, flash floods washing out trails, hikers getting lost for days. Hell, I've pulled 127 people out of situations that should have killed them. But what happened in Ferguson Hollow back in '76? That changed everything I thought I knew about these mountains. I grew up in Boston, came down here after my tour in Vietnam. The Army taught me how to track, how to survive in the wild, how to keep my head when everything goes to hell. When I got back from the war, I couldn't handle the noise and crowds of the city anymore. These mountains called to me, quiet, peaceful, far from all that madness. At least, that's what I thought. Been divorced 3 years now. Sarah took the kids back to Nashville, said she couldn't stand me being gone for weeks at a time. Can't blame her, really. This job gets into your blood. When you're responsible for keeping folks safe in 500,000 acres of wilderness, you don't get many days off. The Cherokee folks who lived here first, they always talked about certain places in these mountains. Hollows where the morning fog never lifts. Spots where animals won't go, where the trees grow funny. They called them bone hollow spirits, things that steal the breath right out of your lungs. I always figured it was just old stories, you know? Mountain folklore mixed with too much corn liquor. Ferguson Hollow sits about 8 miles from the nearest road, tucked between two ridges that rise up over 2,000 feet. There's an old cabin down there from the 1800s, when families used to farm these valleys before the government made it all into parkland. The Cherokee elder, Joseph Crow Feather, he warned me about that place once. Said his great-grandfather told stories about a whole community that just vanished one winter. Found them come spring, all dried up like corn husks, with looks of pure terror frozen on their faces. I never put much stock in ghost stories. My job was keeping real people safe from real dangers. Bears, cliffs, getting lost in the woods. The supernatural stuff was just mountain superstition as far as I was concerned. That changed on a Tuesday morning in October when Sheriff Bobby Hutchins called me at 6:30 a.m. "Mark, we got a problem." His voice crackled through my radio. 3 families went camping down at Ferguson Cabin 4 days ago. Should have checked in yesterday. Nobody's heard word one from them. I grabbed my gear, Kelty pack, Silva compass, emergency medical kit, enough supplies for 3 days. My radio was a Motorola HT 220, standard issue, reliable as sunrise. Weather had been perfect that week, clear skies and mild temperatures. No reason for folks to run into trouble. How many people we talking about, Bobby? 9 total. 3 adults, 6 kids. Tom Morrison took his family, plus the Hendricks and their 2 boys, and... His voice got quiet. "Mark, my Jenny's with them. She's 16, been looking forward to this trip for months." My stomach dropped. Jenny Hutchins was a good kid, smart as a whip, planned to study forestry in college. Bobby was a single dad, raised her by himself after his wife died. If something happened to that girl, I'll take a team and head down there right now, I told him. Probably just having too much fun to remember they got jobs to get back to. But even as I said it, something felt wrong. Tom Morrison was an experienced outdoorsman, been camping these mountains for 20 years. He wasn't the type to miss a check-in. And Ferguson Hollow, well, it always gave me the creeps, though I never could put my finger on why. I assembled my team. 3 other rangers, including Jimmy Torres, a rookie who'd only been with us 6 months. Good kid, eager to learn, but green as grass. We packed into our trucks and headed for the hollow, following old logging roads that hadn't seen much traffic since the 30s. The morning was crisp and clear, but as we got closer to Ferguson Hollow, I noticed something odd. The fog that usually burned off by 10 a.m. was still hanging thick in the valley, like a gray blanket stretched between the ridges. My watch showed it was past noon. "Radio check," I called as we approached the trailhead. "Loud and clear," came back from my team. We hiked down into the hollow, following the old trail that led to the cabin. The forest was dead quiet. No bird calls, no squirrels chattering, no insects buzzing. After 15 years in these woods, I knew that wasn't normal. Even in winter, you hear something. But this was like walking through a cemetery at midnight. The fog got thicker as we descended, until we could barely see 20 feet in any direction. My compass started acting funny, needle spinning like it couldn't find north. I tapped it, figured maybe I'd dropped it somewhere along the way. "Anybody else having compass problems?" I called back to my team. "Mine's going crazy," Torres replied, "spinning like a damn pinwheel." That's when we found the campsite. The 3 tents were set up in a perfect triangle around the old Ferguson cabin, just like any experienced camper would do. Everything looked normal from a distance. Camp chairs arranged around a fire ring, cooler sitting in the shade, clothes hanging from a line strung between 2 trees. But as we got closer, the wrongness hit me like a slap in the face. The coffee pot was still sitting on the camp stove, half full and warm to the touch. Breakfast plates were laid out on the picnic table. Bacon, eggs, toast, all of it fresh like someone had just finished cooking. Steam was still rising from the coffee, but there wasn't a soul in sight. "Hello," I called out. "Park Service. Anybody here?" My voice echoed strangely in the matter. Fog, like it was being swallowed up by something thick and hungry. No answer came back. We checked each tent, moving carefully. All the sleeping bags were still there, personal belongings scattered around like folks had just stepped out for a minute. Jimmy Torres found a half-read paperback book lying open on a pillow, reading glasses sitting right beside it. "Look at this," called Martinez, one of my other rangers. He was kneeling by the fire ring. Coals are still warm. This fire was burning maybe an hour ago. I felt the back of my neck start to prickle. 9 people don't just vanish into thin air, leaving their breakfast warm and their fire burning. There had to be an explanation. "Could be they went for a morning hike," I said, trying to convince myself as much as my team. "Maybe exploring one of the old trails." But even as I said it, I was looking around for signs of where they might have gone. After 15 years of tracking lost hikers, I could read the woods, like a book. But here, around the campsite, I couldn't find a single footprint leading away from the tents. Not one. "Check the cabin," I ordered. The old Ferguson cabin was a 1-room log structure, built sometime in the 1882. The door was standing wide open, and inside we found more of the same strangeness. A half-finished game of cards was spread out on the wooden table. A lantern was still burning, casting dancing shadows on the walls. And that's when Torres made the discovery that turned my blood to ice water. "Ranger Gallagher," he called from the back corner of the cabin. His voice was shaky, like he'd seen something that didn't make sense. "You need to see this." He was pointing at the floor, where a wooden board had been pried up. Underneath was a root cellar, dark as pitch and smelling of damp earth. I shined my flashlight down into the hole. 7 sleeping bags were arranged in a neat row down there, each one with a person-shaped bulge inside. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. "Found them." But when I climbed down into the cellar and unzipped the first sleeping bag, my light revealed something that made my mind want to shut down completely. Inside was a human shape, all right, but it looked like it had been there for decades. The body was completely mummified, eye dried out like old leather, mouth hanging open, eyes sunken back into the skull. I checked the second bag, then the third. Same thing, 7 bodies, all of them dried up like they'd been sitting in the desert for years. But the sleeping bags were warm, the zippers were new. These were modern camping bags, not antiques. "What the hell happened down here?" Martinez whispered. That's when I noticed the expressions on the mummified faces. Every single one of them looked terrified. Not just scared, absolutely horrified, like they'd seen something so awful it literally scared them to death. My radio crackled with static. I tried to call Sheriff Hutchins, but all I got was white noise. Same with trying to reach park headquarters. It was like something was jamming our signals. "Pack it up," I told my team. "We're getting out of here right now." But Torres wasn't listening. He was standing at the cabin door, looking out into the fog with a strange expression on his face. "Do you hear that?" he asked. I stopped and listened. At first, all I heard was the unnatural silence of the hollow. Then, faint as a whisper, I caught it. Children's voices, calling for help. "Help us, please, we're lost." The voices seemed to be coming from different directions all at once. North, south, east, west. Like kids were scattered all through the woods, crying out for rescue. "Jenny?" Torres called out. "Jenny Hutchins? Is that you?" He started walking toward the tree line, following the voices. I grabbed his arm. "Hold on, son. Something's not right here." But the voices kept calling, and they sounded so real, so desperate. Every instinct I'd developed in 15 years of search and rescue was screaming at me to follow those cries, to find those lost children and bring them to safety. That's when I saw the footprints. 6 sets of tracks led away from the campsite, heading straight for the north face of the hollow. I followed them with my flashlight, tracking them across the muddy ground. Adults and children, all walking in single file, like they were following something. The tracks led directly to the base of a cliff that rose straight up for about 60 feet. Solid rock, no handholds, no way to climb it. But the footprints went right up to the rock face and stopped. Not turned around, not scattered in confusion. Just stopped, like the people making them had walked straight into the stone and disappeared. I knelt down and examined the prints more carefully. They were deep and clear, pressed into soft mud, fresh, maybe an hour old, but they ended at solid rock that hadn't been disturbed in 1,000 years. "Martinez," I called. "Come look at this." He studied the tracks, ran his hand along the cliff face, looked up at the 60-foot wall of stone. "That's impossible, Mark. People can't walk through rock." The children's voices called out again, closer this time. Torres was getting agitated, pacing back and forth. "We have to find them," he said. "They're out there. They need help." "Those aren't real voices, Jimmy," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it myself. "Something's playing tricks on us." That's when the temperature dropped. In the space of maybe 30 seconds, it went from a comfortable 70 degrees to so cold I could see my breath. The fog got thicker, pressing in around us like it was alive. And somewhere in that gray wall of mist, I saw something moving. Something tall and thin, walking between the trees just at the edge of vision. "We're leaving," I said, "right now." But when I turned to head back to our trail, I couldn't find it. The fog had gotten so thick that I couldn't see more than 10 feet in any direction. My compass was spinning wildly, no help at all. We were lost in a place I'd been hiking for 15 years. And those children's voices kept calling, leading us deeper into the hollow. We stumbled around in that fog for what felt like hours, though my watch kept showing different times every time I looked at it. First it said 2:30, then 1:45, then 4:15. Like time itself was broken down in that hollow. Torres was getting worse, talking to voices the rest of us couldn't hear. He'd stop every few minutes, tilt his head like he was listening, then start walking in a new direction. "Jenny's over there," he'd say, pointing into the gray wall of fog. "She's hurt. She needs help." I tried to keep the team together, but it was like herding cats. The fog played tricks on your eyes, made you see movement where there wasn't any, made you hear familiar voices calling your name. That's when I heard Sarah, my ex-wife's voice, clear as day, calling from somewhere deep in the woods. Mark, help me, I'm hurt." Now, I knew damn well that Sarah was 200 miles away in Nashville, probably at her job at the bank. But hearing her voice in distress hit something primal in my brain. Even after the divorce, even after all the fighting, I still loved that woman. The sound of her in pain made me want to drop everything and run to help. I caught myself taking a step toward the voice and forced myself to stop. "That's not Sarah," I said out loud. "Sarah's in Nashville." But the voice came again, more desperate this time. "Mark, please, something's wrong with the kids. They're hurt." "My kids?" "Amy and little Mike." The voice was saying something had happened to my children. I took 3 more steps before Martinez grabbed my arm. "Boss, you're walking toward a cliff," he said. I looked down and saw my feet were inches away from a drop-off that vanished into the fog. If Martinez hadn't stopped me, I would have walked right off the edge. "Thanks," I muttered, but the voice kept calling. It sounded so much like Sarah that my hands were shaking. We regrouped by the cabin, trying to get our bearings. That's when Martinez made another discovery that turned the whole situation on its head. "Mark, look at this newspaper." He'd found it in the cabin, sitting on the table like someone had just been reading it. The paper was in perfect condition, crisp and white, like it had just come off the press. But the date at the top made my blood run cold. The 15th of October, 1897. The headline read, "Entire Ferguson family found dead. Mysterious plague strikes mountain community." I read the article with growing horror. It described how the Ferguson family, T7 people, had been discovered in their cabin, all of them mummified and showing signs of extreme terror. The local doctor couldn't explain what had killed them. Their bodies were dried out like they'd been sitting in the sun for months, but neighbors had spoken to them just days before. "This is impossible," I said. "This newspaper should have crumbled to dust decades ago." But there it was, solid and real in my hands. And as I read further, I found more articles about similar deaths throughout the mountains. Entire families found dried up in their homes, all wearing expressions of absolute horror. Torres was getting worse. He'd stopped responding to our calls and was wandering in circles, following voices only he could hear. I tried to grab him, but he pulled away with strength I didn't know he had. "She's calling me," he said, his eyes unfocused. "She needs help." Then he walked straight into the fog and disappeared. We searched for him for an hour, calling his name, following his footsteps until they vanished in the soft earth. It was like the hollow had swallowed him whole. "We need to get out of here," Martinez said. "Get back up. Come back with more." And then I knew he was right, but leaving Torres behind went against everything I believed in as a ranger. You don't abandon your people, ever. That's when the fog started to clear. Just a little at first, then more, until we could see maybe 50 feet in each direction. And that's when I saw Torres. He was standing at the edge of the cliff, perfectly still, his arms hanging at his sides. His back was to us, and he wasn't moving at all. Not even breathing. "Jimmy," I called out. He didn't respond. I walked closer, and what I saw made my stomach turn over. Torres was standing with his toes hanging over the edge of a 200-foot drop. His eyes were open but completely empty, like no one was home behind them. His breathing was so shallow I could barely see his chest moving. When I touched his shoulder, his skin was ice cold. "Jimmy, can you hear me?" Nothing. He just stood there, staring down into the abyss like he was waiting for something. I managed to pull him back from the edge, but he was like a sleepwalker, alive but not really there. His pulse was barely detectable, his breathing so faint it was like he was dying right in front of me. Martinez helped me carry him back to the cabin. We laid him down on one of the old bunks, covered him with blankets, tried to warm him up. But he stayed in that strange, distant state, like most of his life had been drained right out of him. That's when I found the carving. On the wall of the cabin, scratched into the old logs with something sharp, were dozens of names and dates. Most of them were from the 1800s, too. Ferguson family members, neighbors, travelers who'd stayed in the cabin over the years. But there, near the bottom of the list, carved in fresh wood, I found something that made my hands start shaking. Marcus Gallagher, 1976. My name, carved in wood that looked like it had been cut yesterday. But I'd never been in this cabin before in my life. Never carved my name in anything. Someone or something had put it there. And below my name, in the same fresh carving, were more names I recognized. Martinez, Orez, the sheriff's daughter, Jenny, all of us, scratched into that wall like we were already dead. The fog was starting to roll back in, thicker than before. The temperature was dropping again, and somewhere in the gray mist, I could hear footsteps. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. Something was coming for us. The footsteps circled the cabin like a predator sizing up its prey. Slow and measured, each step echoing strangely in the fog. I grabbed my rifle, a Winchester 30-30 I'd carried for 15 years, and moved to the window. "What do you see out there?" Martinez whispered. At first, just gray fog swirling between the trees. Then a shadow moved past the window. Tall, too tall to be human. Maybe 9 feet, thin as a scarecrow, moving with an unnatural gliding motion. The footsteps stopped. Dead silence filled the room. Hollow, so complete it hurt my ears. Even Torres's shallow breathing seemed to disappear. Then, from right outside the cabin door, came a voice I recognized. "Mark? Mark, is that you in there?" It was my father's voice. My father, who died in Vietnam 2 years before I was born. "Don't listen to it," I told Martinez. "Whatever that thing is, it's not human." But the voice was so clear, so familiar from old recordings my mother had played for me. "Son, I need your help. I'm hurt real bad. Please open the door." Every fiber of my being wanted to respond to my father's call for help. The man I'd never met but always wanted to know. The hero who died serving his country before he could see his only child. I gripped the rifle tighter and stayed put. The voice changed then, becoming my ex-wife Sarah. "Mark, the kids are out here. Amy and Mike are with me. They're scared, Mark. They need their daddy." My children. The thing was threatening my children. That's when the door exploded inward. The creature that came through wasn't quite human and wasn't quite anything else. 9 feet tall, gray skin stretched tight over bones that seemed too long and too thin. Where its eyes should have been were empty sockets that glowed with pale blue light. When it opened its mouth, I could see rows of teeth, like broken glass. But the worst part was its voice. It spoke with every voice I'd ever heard. My father, my ex-wife, my children, Torres, even my own voice talking back at me. "You don't belong here," it said in a chorus of familiar sounds. "This hollow is mine. These souls are mine." I raised the rifle and fired 3 shots center mass. The bullets passed right through the creature, like it was made of smoke, embedding themselves in the cabin wall behind it. The thing laughed with the sound of wind through a graveyard. "Iron and gunpowder," it said in my father's voice. Such simple tools for such a complex problem. Martinez was backing toward the rear of the cabin, but there was nowhere to go. The creature filled the doorway completely, and behind it I could see more shapes moving in the fog. The mummified bodies from the cellar, walking on legs that should have crumbled to dust decades ago. That's when I remembered what Joseph Crow Feather had told me about the hollow. Cherokee burial ground. Ancient spirits. The gray walker that feeds on breath. "You're the spirit that killed the Ferguson family," I said. The creature tilted its head, and when it spoke, it used the voice of a young girl, probably one of the Ferguson children. "They disturbed our rest, built their cabin on sacred ground, dug their cellar through our bones." The blue light in its eye sockets grew brighter, and I felt something strange happening to my lungs. Like the air was being pulled out of them by an invisible force. Next to me, Martinez was gasping, clutching his chest. "We are the guardians of this place," the creature continued, now speaking in an old Cherokee dialect I somehow understood. "We were bound here by blood and ceremony to protect the sleeping dead. All who disturb this hollow must join us." I could feel my life being drained away, breath by breath. My vision was starting to blur, and my legs felt like they were made of water. Torres was already more dead than alive, his breathing so faint it was almost gone. That's when I remembered my grandfather's pocket watch. My mother's father had been a Cherokee medicine man, though he'd never talked much about the old ways. When he died, he'd left me his old brass pocket watch, the only thing I had of him besides some stories my mother told. I pulled the watch from my vest pocket with hands that were shaking from oxygen loss. The creature paused, its blue gaze fixed on the piece of brass. "Joseph Crow Feather told me about tobacco offerings," I gasped out. "About speaking the names of the dead. I didn't have tobacco, but I had respect. I had recognition of what this thing was, not evil, but duty. A guardian doing what it was bound to do. I know the names," I wheezed, pulling out the 1,897 newspaper. "James Ferguson, Mary Ferguson, little Sarah Ferguson, only 6 years old, Thomas Ferguson, Elizabeth Ferguson." As I spoke each name, the creature seemed to waver, like heat shimmers on hot asphalt. "Samuel Ferguson, baby John Ferguson, not even 2 years old." The blue light was fading from its eyes. Around us, the mummified figures had stopped moving. "I'm sorry," I said, holding up my grandfather's watch. "I'm sorry they built here without permission. Sorry they disturbed your rest. This is all I have to offer, but it belonged to one of your people. Maybe it's enough." I set the watch on the cabin floor between us. The creature looked down at the brass timepiece, then back at me. When it spoke, its voice was different. It's older, sadder, but somehow more human. Your grandfather was Joseph Running Bear, it said. He knew the old ways. He would have asked permission. The gray skin was starting to fade, becoming translucent. Through its body, I could see the cabin wall behind it. The hollow remembers, it continued, but remembrance brings mercy, sometimes. Take your people and go. Never return to this place. If you disturb our rest again, you will join us permanently. The fog began to lift for the first time since we'd entered the hollow. Fresh air rushed into the cabin, and I took the deepest breath of my life. Martinez was coughing and gasping beside me, but he was alive. Torres stirred on the bunk, his breathing returning to normal. The creature was almost completely gone now, just a faint outline in the doorway. Tell the Cherokee. Tell them the Gray Walker still keeps faith with the old agreements. Then it was gone, and the fog with it. Sunlight streamed through the cabin windows, showing us the way out of the hollow. Our radios crackled back to life, and I could hear Sheriff Hutchins calling our names through the static. They found us 6 hours later, stumbling out of Ferguson Hollow like survivors of a shipwreck. Torres had to be hospitalized. Well, BS, severe hypothermia and respiratory distress, the doctors said, though they couldn't explain how he'd gotten so cold in 70-degree weather. Martinez and I spent 3 days answering questions. Park Service investigators, state police, federal agents, everyone wanted to know what had happened to the 9 missing campers. We told them the truth, but nobody believed a word of it. The official report listed the Ferguson Hollow incident as a geological anomaly with associated psychological effects. The 9 missing people were declared victims of a localized atmospheric disturbance that had apparently mummified their bodies through unknown means. The hollow was declared off-limits due to unstable ground conditions. All records of what really happened were classified. Sheriff Hutchins never got his daughter back. None of the families got their loved ones back. Jenny and the others joined the long list of people who'd disturbed the rest of that ancient burial ground. I transferred to a desk job a month later. Couldn't handle being in the deep woods anymore. Couldn't stand the sound of fog moving through trees. Started having nightmares every night. Dreams about blue lights in empty eye sockets, about children's voices calling for help from places where no children should be. Joseph Crowfeather performed a cleansing ceremony at the entrance to Ferguson Hollow. He and 12 other Cherokee elders spent 3 days burning sage and sweetgrass, chanting in the old language, setting up traditional barriers that would warn people away. The Gray Walker keeps faith with the old agreements, he told me afterward. Your grandfather's gift was accepted, but the hollow remembers everything, and forgiveness has limits. I asked. To him how many other places like Ferguson Hollow existed in these mountains. Dozens, he said quietly. Maybe more. Places where the old guardians still keep watch. Most people are smart enough to stay away from spots where the morning fog never lifts. That was 30 years ago. I'm retired now, living in a small house in Gatlinburg, as far from the deep woods as I can get while still staying in Tennessee. But I keep in touch with other rangers, other people who've seen things in these mountains that don't make it into official reports. There's a network of us, park rangers, local police, Cherokee elders, even some researchers from the universities. We share information about the places that should be avoided, the trails that lead to nowhere good, the hollows where modern people shouldn't go. Ferguson Hollow is still off limits. The official reason changes every few years. Unstable geology, endangered species habitat, archaeological preservation, but the real reason stays the same. Some places in these ancient mountains are older than human memory. The Cherokee knew this, respected it, made agreements with powers that don't follow the laws of the modern world. When those agreements are broken, when the old boundaries are crossed, there are consequences. I still carry a picture of my grandfather's pocket watch in my wallet. Lost the real one that day in the hollow, but I can't forget what it represented. Respect for the old ways. Acknowledgement that there are forces in this world beyond our understanding. If you ever find yourself hiking in the Smokies, remember this. Stay on marked trails, camp in designated areas, and if you come across a hollow where the morning fog never lifts, where the wildlife goes silent and your compass spins like a broken toy, turn around and walk away. Don't be curious. Don't be brave. Don't think you know better than 100 generations of people who understood these mountains. Just walk away. Because the Gray Walker still keeps faith with the old agreements. And disturbing ancient rest comes with a price that's higher than any modern person should be willing to pay. Trust me on this. I've seen what happens when someone decides to test that boundary, and I'm one of the lucky ones who lived to tell about it. My name is Patricia Ironcloud, but everyone at Shenandoah National Park calls me Patty. I've been a ranger here for 10 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything these mountains could throw at me. Boy, was I wrong. It was October 1991, and the leaves were just starting to turn. I was sitting in my office, filling out paperwork about a problem bear we'd relocated the week before, when my radio crackled to life. "Patty, we need you up at Old Rag Mountain. Got a situation." I grabbed my gear and headed out. Old Rag is one of our most popular hiking spots, a granite peak with a tough scramble section that draws rock climbers from all over Virginia. It's also where my great-grandmother used to tell stories about the old days, back when the Monacan people lived in these mountains before the settlers came. The drive up to the trailhead took 20 minutes, winding through thick oak and hickory forest. I'd made this trip hundreds of times, but something felt different today. The woods were too quiet. No bird song, no squirrel chatter, just an odd silence that made my skin crawl. Dr. Mike Chen, our park veterinarian, was waiting for me at the parking area. His face was pale, and his hands shook as he lit a cigarette. "What have we got, Mike?" "Hiker attack. Bad one." He took a long drag. Guy named Robert Hayes, experienced climber from Richmond. His buddy found him about 2 hours ago. We hiked up the trail toward the granite scramble. I've tracked bears my whole career, relocated 45 of them without a single injury to human or animal. Bears are predictable if you understand them. They avoid people when they can, fight only when cornered or protecting cubs. But the scene we found didn't make sense. Robert Hayes had been camping in a small clearing about a quarter mile from the main trail. His tent was shredded, gear scattered everywhere. The attack pattern was all wrong, though. Most bear attacks are quick and defensive. Swipe, bite, then retreat. This looked deliberate, calculated. "Look at these claw marks," Mike said, pointing to deep gouges in a nearby oak tree. "They go up 12 feet. No black bear in Virginia gets that tall on its hind legs." I knelt beside the torn tent, studying the tracks in the soft earth. Bear paw prints, definitely, but they showed something I'd never seen before. The tracks alternated between normal four-paw patterns and stretches where only the hind feet touched the ground, like the bear had been walking upright for yards at a time. "Maybe it's injured," I suggested. Sometimes bears adapt new ways of moving when they're hurt. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. The tracks showed no signs of limping or favoring one side, and there was something else. Scattered throughout the bear prints were what looked like human footprints. Bare feet, large and broad, with toes that seemed too long. My radio buzzed. "Patty, you there?" "Go ahead. We got another report. Campers about 2 miles south say they've been hearing weird sounds all night, like a bear, but also like someone talking." I felt a chill run down my spine. My grandmother used to tell stories about the bear walkers, shamans who could take the form of bears to protect sacred places. But those were just stories, weren't they? "We'll check it out," I radioed back. As we packed up our equipment, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Around the edge of the campsite, dozens of bear tracks circled the area. Not one bear, many bears. And they all showed the same impossible pattern of switching between 4 legs and 2. Mike saw me staring at the tracks. "Patty, in 15 years as a vet, I've never seen anything like this. It's like they were coordinating." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Let's get back to headquarters. We need to set up a tracking operation." But as we hiked back down the mountain, I made it a twirl, couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Several times I caught glimpses of dark shapes moving through the trees, always just at the edge of my vision. And once, I could have sworn I heard someone calling my name in a voice that sounded like my great-grandmother's. That night, I called my son Tommy at home. He was 16 and staying with my sister while I worked this case. "Mom, I had the weirdest dream last night," he said. "I was walking through the woods, but I wasn't me. I was bigger, stronger, and I could smell things I'd never smelled before." "Just a dream, honey," I told him. but my hands were shaking as I hung up the phone. I'd grown up hearing bear walker stories, but I'd always figured they were just tribal memory of particularly large bears. Now I wasn't so sure. The next morning, I assembled a tracking team. Besides Mike and myself, we had Tom Rodriguez from the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, and Sarah Kim, a wildlife photographer who'd volunteered to document our efforts. We set up base camp at the Old Rag parking area and deployed motion sensor cameras throughout the region. Standard protocol for tracking problem bears. Find their territory, monitor their movement patterns, then use tranquilizer darts to relocate them safely. The way I see it, Tom said as we reviewed topographic maps, we're dealing with a large male black bear, probably 400 to 500 pounds. Maybe he's sick, or maybe the drought this summer messed with his normal food sources. It sounded reasonable. It should have been routine. By noon, we'd placed 12 cameras along known game trails. Each one had fresh batteries and infrared capability for night photography. If a bear was moving through this area, we'd get pictures. The first sign something was wrong came around 3 p.m. Sarah was checking the camera we'd placed near Hayes' campsite when she called out, "Guys, you need to see this." The camera was bent, nearly in half. Not broken, bent, as if something incredibly strong had grabbed it and twisted it like a pretzel. The metal housing was dented with what looked like fingerprints, but they were huge, twice the size of human hands. Bear could have done this, Tom said, but he didn't sound convinced. We replaced the camera and moved on. An hour later, Sarah's replacement camera was also destroyed, this time crushed completely flat and wedged into the fork of a tree 15 feet off the ground. "No bear throws cameras into trees," Mike muttered. That's when we found the cave. It was hidden behind a curtain of mountain laurel, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. The entrance was large enough for a person to walk through upright, but scratch marks around the opening suggested something much bigger. We used it regularly. I clicked on my flashlight and stepped inside. The cave went back about 30 feet, opening into a circular chamber carved from solid granite. On one side, I found typical bear den features, a shallow depression lined with leaves and grass. But on the other side was something that made no sense. Human artifacts, old ones, a stone axe head, pottery shards with traditional Monacan designs. And in the center of the chamber, a circle of stones arranged around a flat altar rock. The altar was stained dark with something that looked like dried blood, but the stains were fresh, maybe days old, not centuries. "Patty, you need to get out here," Sarah called from outside the cave. I emerged to find the three of them staring at the ground around the cave entrance. In the soft earth, dozens of tracks crisscrossed in complex patterns. Bear tracks and human tracks, intermingled so closely it was impossible to tell where one set ended and another began. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was that some of the tracks seemed to show the transition from human feet to bear paws, as if we were looking at snapshots of an actual transformation. "This is impossible," Tom said. "Animals don't change shape, people don't turn into bears." I knelt beside one of the clearest transition tracks. 5 human toes gradually becoming 4 bear claws, the footpad elongating and widening. The detail was perfect, preserved in mud like a fossil. My radio crackled. "Base camp to tracking team. Come in." "Go ahead, base. We've got a problem. That hiker who found Robert Hayes, he just called in. Says he's being stalked by something big. Wants to know if we've caught the bear yet. Tell him to stay in his vehicle." And the transmission cut to static. Then, through the white noise, we heard something that made our blood freeze. A low, rumbling voice speaking words in what sounded like an old Native American language. The voice was deep and gravelly, like it was coming from something with a throat much larger than human. "What the hell was that?" Tom whispered. I recognized some of the words. My grandmother had taught me basic Monacan when I was little. The voice was saying something about sacred ground and ancient duty. Sarah grabbed my arm. "Patty, look." About 50 yards away, a massive black shape moved between the trees. At first glance, it looked like a bear, but it was walking on its hind legs like a person. And it was huge. At least 8 feet tall, maybe more. We all froze, watching as the creature moved through the forest with impossible silence for something so large. It paused once, turning its head in our direction, and I saw eyes that glowed yellow in the afternoon shadows. Then it spoke, in perfect English. Patricia Ironcloud, daughter of Mary Ironcloud, granddaughter of Elizabeth Ironcloud. You should not be here. My knees nearly gave out. The creature knew my name, knew my family. Who are you? I called out, surprised that my voice worked at all. I am what your family made me, what your bloodline created to guard this place. The creature's voice carried easily across the distance, deep and resonant. Your great-great-grandfather bound me to this mountain. Now, you must choose whether to honor that bond or suffer the consequences. Tom reached for his tranquilizer gun, but the creature moved faster than anything that size should be able to move. One moment, it was 50 yards away. The next, it was gone, vanished into the forest without a sound. We stood in stunned silence for several minutes before anyone spoke. Did that really just happen? Sarah whispered. I nodded, though part of me wanted to pretend it was some kind of shared hallucination. But the tracks were still there in the mud. The destroyed cameras were real, and deep in my bones, I felt a recognition I couldn't explain, like some part of me had been waiting my whole life for this encounter. We need to get back to base camp, I said, and we need to call in backup. But as we packed our gear, I couldn't stop thinking about what the creature had said. My great-great-grandfather bound me to this mountain. I'd never heard that story from my grandmother. What had my family done, and why was this thing targeting me? That night, my sister called. Tommy had disappeared from his bedroom. She'd found his window open and tracks in the garden that looked like bear paws. Large ones. He left this note, she said, her voice shaking. Gone to find my true family. The bear father is calling. I dropped the phone and ran for my truck. Whatever this thing was, it had my son. I drove through the night, my hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles went white. Tommy's note kept echoing in my head. The bear father is calling. What did that mean, and how did a creature in the mountains know about my son? By dawn, I was back at Old Rag with a much larger team. The Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries had sent their crisis response unit, complete with tracking dogs and specialized bear hunting equipment. Park headquarters wanted this resolved before the weekend, brought hundreds of hikers into the area. We've got thermal imaging equipment being airlifted in, announced Captain James Walsh, the state wildlife officer now in charge of the operation. Whatever this thing is, we'll find it. But I knew we were dealing with something beyond their experience, something beyond normal animal behavior. The tracking dogs found Tommy's scent trail within an hour. It led straight up the mountain toward the granite scramble, but the dogs kept acting strange. They'd follow the trail for a few yards, then stop and whine, looking around nervously before continuing. Twice they refused to go further until their handlers forced them. Dogs are spooked, said their trainer, a grizzled man named Pete. Never seen them act like this. It's like they're smelling something that scares them on a level they don't understand. The trail led to the same cave where we'd found the mixed tracks. But now the cave entrance was blocked by a massive boulder that hadn't been there before. It would have taken heavy machinery to move a rock that size, or something with supernatural strength. There, Sarah pointed to scratch marks on the boulder's surface. They spelled out words in English, "Come alone, Patricia, or the boy dies." Captain Walsh immediately started organizing a tactical response. We'll set up a perimeter, use tear gas to flush it out, then, no. I cut him off. It wants me alone. And it has my son. Ranger Ironcloud, I can't authorize you to. You don't need to authorize anything. This is my choice. Mike grabbed my arm. Patty, whatever this thing is, it's not just a bear. It's intelligent, it's planning, and it's connected to your family somehow. I'd been thinking about that all night. During the drive, I'd called my grandmother's older sister, Aunt Rose, who lived on the Monacan reservation. If anyone knew our family's old stories, it would be her. The bear walkers, she'd said when I described what I'd seen. I thought that bloodline had died out with your great-great-grandfather. Thomas Ironcloud was the last keeper, far as anyone knew. Keeper of what? The sacred sites, the places where the spirits of the mountain lived. Thomas made a pact back in the 1890 seconds, when the government was trying to force all us Monacan people off our ancestral lands. He agreed to become the guardian, to take the bear spirit into himself to protect the holy places. That's just a story, Aunt Rose. Is it? The attacks stopped after Thomas disappeared into the mountains. For 100 years, no one was killed by bears on Old Rag Mountain. No one even saw bears there unless they were passing through. The Guardian was doing his job. But Thomas died decades ago. Did he, or did he become something else? Something that doesn't age the way humans do? Now, standing in front of the blocked cave, I understood what she meant. The creature that spoke to me yesterday wasn't just some random bear. It was my ancestor, Thomas Ironcloud, trapped between human and animal, bound to protect the mountain until someone from his bloodline could take his place, and it wanted that someone to be me. I'm going in, I told the team. Give me 2 hours. If I'm not back by then, do whatever you think is best. Captain Walsh started to protest, but I was already moving the smaller rocks away from the cave entrance, creating a gap just wide enough to squeeze through. The cave was different now. Larger. The circular chamber had been expanded, and tunnels led off in multiple directions. Phosphorescent moss on the walls provided an eerie green light, enough to see by but not enough to feel safe. I followed the main tunnel deeper into the mountain. The air smelled of earth and musk and something else, something wild and primal that made every instinct tell me to run. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber. And there, in the center, I found Tommy. He was sitting cross-legged on a raised stone platform, his eyes closed. But he wasn't quite Tommy anymore. His fingernails had grown into claws. Dark hair covered his arms and face. When he opened his eyes, they glowed the same yellow as the creature's. "Mom," he said, but his voice was deeper, rougher. "I understand now. I understand what we really are. Tommy, we're getting out of here." "No." The voice came from behind me. I turned to see the creature emerging from one of the side tunnels, but now it was in human form, or mostly human. It stood about 7 feet tall, with Thomas Ironcloud's face aged and weathered, but with bare claws instead of fingers and teeth that were far too sharp. "Your son has chosen his path," the creature said. "The bear spirit calls to him because it is his birthright, just as it is yours. I don't want any part of this." "Want?" The creature laughed, a sound like distant thunder. "This isn't about want, granddaughter. This is about duty, about the sacred trust your family has kept for generations." He gestured to the walls of the chamber, and I saw they were covered with paintings. Old ones, showing the history of the Monacan people, the coming of the Europeans, the loss of the sacred lands, and one man, standing alone against a tide of destruction, calling on the bear spirits to give him the strength to protect what remained. "I have guarded this mountain for over a century," the creature continued. "I have kept the sacred sites safe, turned away those who would desecrate them, protected the spirits that live in the deep places. But I am tired, Patricia. So very tired." Tommy stood up from the platform, and I saw that his transformation was nearly complete. In another few hours, he would be more bear than human. "He doesn't have to do this," I said. "He's just a kid. The bloodline must continue. The Guardian must be renewed. If not you, then him. If not him." The creature's eyes glowed brighter. "Then no one. And when I am gone, the sacred places will be vulnerable. Developers will come, miners will come. The spirits will be driven away forever." I thought about the hotel proposals we'd been fighting, the mining company that wanted to survey the area for mineral rights, the constant pressure to open more of the park to commercial development. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Undergo the ritual. Accept the bear spirit into yourself. Become the guardian your family was meant to be. And if I refuse?" The creature looked at Tommy, who was now standing on all fours, his transformation almost complete. "Then your son finishes what he has started, and you watch him lose his humanity forever." I stared at my son, who was no longer quite my son. Tommy's face was elongating into a snout. His hands were becoming massive paws, and when he looked at me, I saw wild animal instinct replacing human recognition. "How long do I have to decide?" I asked the creature. "The moon rises full tonight. The transformation ritual must be completed by dawn, or it becomes permanent. Your son will be lost forever to the bear spirit." 6 hours. I had 6 hours to figure out how to save Tommy without sacrificing myself to whatever my ancestor had become. "I need to think," I said. "Think quickly. The choice you make will echo through generations." The creature gestured, and the stone platform began to sink into the floor, carrying Tommy down into the depths of the mountain. I started toward him, but the creature blocked my path. He is safe, sleeping. The transformation process is exhausting. Those yellow eyes studied me intently. You may leave, granddaughter. Consider what I have told you. But remember, return alone or the boy dies. I found my way back through the tunnels to the cave entrance. The team was still waiting, and Captain Walsh immediately started asking questions I couldn't answer. How do you explain shape-shifting shamans to someone who lives in a world of ballistics reports and wildlife management protocols? The boy's alive, I told them. But the situation is complicated. Mike pulled me aside while Captain Walsh coordinated with his team. Patty, your son's been missing for 18 hours. Whatever's going on in there, we need to end it now. It's not that simple. Make it simple. Is this thing holding Tommy hostage or not? I wanted to say yes. That would have been the easy answer. The one that would bring tactical teams and helicopters and enough firepower to solve any problem. But it wasn't true. Tommy had gone willingly. The bear walker, my great-great-grandfather, wasn't a kidnapper. He was a guardian doing what he thought was necessary to protect something sacred. I need to call someone, I said. 20 minutes later, I was on the phone with Aunt Rose again, telling her everything I'd learned. The full moon tonight, she said thoughtfully. Yes, that makes sense. The bear walker ritual can only be completed during the full moon. Thomas chose that timing for a reason. What kind of reason? The moon gives you power over the transformation. If you undergo the ritual willingly during the full moon, you keep your human consciousness while gaining bear strength. You become a guardian instead of a monster. And if I don't, then Tommy's transformation continues without the moon's influence. He becomes a pure bear spirit, powerful but no longer human, no longer your son. There has to be another way. Patricia, listen to me. I've lived 83 years, and I've seen our people lose almost everything. Our lands, our language, our sacred sites. Thomas Ironcloud was the last keeper because he was the last one brave, enough to pay the price. If you don't take his place, Old Rag Mountain becomes just another piece of real estate. I don't care about real estate. I care about my son. So did Thomas. He had children too, grandchildren. But he understood that some duties are bigger than family. I hung up and sat in my truck, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. In 3 hours, the moon would rise. In 6 hours, I would lose Tommy forever, unless I gave up my own humanity to save his. That's when Captain Walsh approached with news that changed everything. Ranger Ironcloud, we've got a problem. 3 more hikers are missing. College kids from JMU who were camping near Hawksbill Mountain. And there are reports of a whole pack of bears moving through the area, all walking upright. My blood went cold. A pack? At least a dozen, maybe more. Local police are getting calls from all over the county. Bears acting like people, people acting like bears. It's like whatever's happening here is spreading. I understood now. The bear walker wasn't just keeping Tommy as leverage. He was creating more guardians, more protectors for the mountain. And if I didn't stop him tonight, the transformation would spread beyond our family, beyond any hope of control. I have to go back in, I told Captain Walsh. Absolutely not. We're going in with full tactical support. If you do that, people will die. All those missing hikers, my son, they'll be killed the moment your team enters those caves. How do you know that? Because I was beginning to understand how the bear walker thought. He wasn't evil, he was desperate. 100 years of protecting the mountain alone had driven him to extremes. In his mind, creating an army of bear guardians was the only way to ensure the sacred sites would never be threatened again. But an army of bear spirits loose in Virginia would be a catastrophe beyond imagining. Give me until dawn. I said. If I haven't resolved this by then, do whatever you think is best. Captain Walsh studied my face. You know something you're not telling me? Yes, and I'm the only one who can fix this. As the moon rose full and bright above Old Rag Mountain, I walked back into the cave alone. This time, I carried no equipment except a small leather pouch Aunt Rose had given me years ago. Sacred tobacco and sage for prayers I'd never thought I'd need to make. The creature was waiting for me in the great chamber, now in full bear form but still retaining human speech. Around him, I could see at least 10 other figures in various stages of transformation, the missing hikers, plus others I didn't recognize. "You have decided?" he asked. "I've decided to offer you a different choice," I said. "There is no other choice." "Yes, there is. You can rest." The great bear tilted his massive head. "Rest? You've been the guardian for over a century. You've kept your promise, protected the sacred places, honored the spirits of the mountain, but you don't have to do it forever. If I rest, who will guard? Me, but not the way you think." I pulled out the pouch of sacred tobacco. "I'll become a guardian, but a human guardian. I'll use my position as a ranger to protect these sites legally, create conservation zones, historical preserves, sacred ground that can't be developed or mined. Human laws are weak. They change with politics and money. Some do, but some don't. And I have 40 years of career left to build protections that will last long after I'm gone." I stepped closer to the massive bear. "You've carried this burden alone for too long, great-great-grandfather. Let me carry it my way." For a long moment, the chamber was silent. Then the bear spoke, and for the first time, his voice sounded tired instead of threatening. "And if you fail? If the developers come anyway? Then my son can choose to become what we are. But let him make that choice as an adult, with full knowledge of what it means. Don't take his humanity away when he's 16 years old." The bear looked at the other transformed figures around the chamber. "And these others? Return them to their human forms. Let them go home. Use your power to heal instead of transform. You ask me to trust in human promises. Humans have broken every promise they ever made to our people." "Not all of us," I said quietly. "And I'm your blood, your family. If you can't trust me, who can you trust?" The great bear stared at me for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, he began to change. Not into another form, but into something else entirely. The massive bear body became translucent, then transparent, then simply gone. In its place stood an old Monacan man in traditional dress, looking exactly like the photos I'd seen of Thomas Ironcloud. He looked tired, but peaceful for the first time in over a century. "Very well, granddaughter," he said. "I will trust in your promise. But know this, if you fail, if the sacred places are threatened, the bear spirit will return. And it may not be so patient the next time." He raised his hand, and light filled the chamber. When it faded, all the transformed figures had returned to human form, including Tommy. They were unconscious but breathing, alive and whole. "Keep your promise," Thomas said, and then he was gone. Not dead, but simply at rest. It took 3 days to get everyone out of the caves and back to civilization. The missing hikers remembered nothing of their transformation, believing they'd simply gotten lost in the woods and been rescued by park rangers. Tommy remembered more, but he understood instinctively that some secrets were meant to be kept. Captain Walsh filed a report about a large aggressive bear that had been successfully relocated to a remote area. No one questioned the story too closely. People wanted simple explanations for events that couldn't be simply explained, but I knew the truth was more complicated than that. 6 months later, I was sitting in a congressional hearing room in Washington, D.C., testifying before a subcommittee on environmental protection. Through careful research and documentation, I'd built a case for designating the Old Rag Mountain area as a sacred site under the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. "Ranger Ironcloud," the committee chairman said, "your proposal would essentially make this entire region off-limits to commercial development. That's a significant economic impact." "Yes, sir, it is. But some places are worth more than their economic value. Old Rag Mountain contains irreplaceable cultural and spiritual significance to the Monacan people. It's also home to unique wildlife populations that require protection." What I didn't tell them was how unique those wildlife populations had become. Since that night in the caves, the bears in the area had displayed unusual intelligence and organization. They seemed to understand the boundaries of protected areas with uncanny precision. Poachers and illegal developers found themselves consistently deterred by bears that appeared exactly when and where they were needed. It was as if Thomas Ironcloud's spirit had dispersed into the mountain itself, turning every bear into a minor guardian of the sacred places. The committee voted to approve my proposal, Old Rag Mountain became one of the most protected pieces of land in Virginia, with both federal environmental protection and Native American sacred site status. It would never be developed, never be mined, never be anything but wilderness. I kept my promise. Tommy went back to school, but he was different now. More aware of the natural world, more connected to our family's heritage. Sometimes I caught him talking to wild animals, and they seemed to understand him. He never fully transformed again, but the bear spirit had left its mark on him. On full moon nights, he still dreams of walking through the forest on 4 legs. But now he understands those dreams as a gift rather than a curse. Last week, I got a call from a ranger in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. She'd heard about my work at Old Rag and wanted to know if I could help with some unusual wildlife behavior they'd been experiencing. "It's probably nothing," she said, "but we've got reports of wolves that seem to be protecting certain areas from development. And some of the local Cherokee elders are telling stories about spirit guardians returning to defend their ancestral sites." I told her I'd be there next month to consult on their situation, because I'm beginning to understand that what happened at Old Rag Mountain wasn't unique. All across the country, in places where indigenous peoples once lived and worshipped, the old guardians are stirring. The spirits are returning to protect what remains of the sacred places. And sometimes they need human partners to do it effectively. My name is Patricia Ironcloud, and I'm a ranger with the National Park Service. But I'm also something else now. A keeper of old promises, a bridge between the human world and the spirit world, a guardian who protects sacred places with law books instead of claws. Most days, that's enough. But on full moon nights, when I hear the bears calling from the deep woods, I remember that there are other kinds of protection available if the legal ones ever fail. Some family legacies choose you whether you're ready or not. The trick is learning to honor them without losing yourself in the process. The spirits of Old Rag Mountain sleep peacefully now, knowing they have protectors who understand both worlds, the world of humans and the world of the bear walkers who came before. And if anyone ever threatens those sacred places again, they'll find out just how effective that protection can be. My name is Samuel Blackthorne, and I've been a park ranger at Mount Rogers for 14 years. In that time, I've pulled more frozen bodies off that mountain than any ranger in Virginia history. I always figured cold kills people. People don't choose to freeze. I was wrong about the choosing part. Mount Rogers stands 5,729 feet tall, the highest peak in Virginia. Most folks think mountains down south can't be dangerous, but they're dead wrong. That peak has killed 11 people since 1960, all from hypothermia. All of them good climbers with proper gear who should have known better. I used to be a medic in the Army before this job. Saw my whole squad die in a helicopter crash in Alaska. The cold took them faster than the impact did. After that, I couldn't handle the military anymore, but I knew cold weather and I knew how to save people. Park Service seemed like a good fit. The thing about Mount Rogers is the weather changes faster than you can blink. 1 minute it's 70 degrees and sunny. Next minute, you're in a blizzard that came out of nowhere. The old-timers around here call it the Ice Widow's breath. They say she was the wife of some surveyor back in 1793 who got lost up there and froze to death. Legend goes she went looking for him and froze too. And now she's still up there, still looking for company. Pure mountain superstition, I always figured. People die on mountains because they make mistakes, not because of ghosts. My ex-wife Lisa never understood why I stayed with this job after our divorce last year. "It's too dangerous, Sam," she'd say. "What happens to Emma if something happens to you?" Emma's my 8-year-old daughter, and she's the only thing that matters to me anymore. Lisa got custody most of the time because of my high-risk occupation. That still burns me up. I've made 73 successful rescues in my time here. I know every trail, every weather pattern, every dangerous spot on that mountain. I carry a grivel ice, axe, Petzl headlamp, emergency bivvy, and enough medical supplies to treat severe hypothermia. I know the difference between mild hypothermia, when you're shivering and confused, and severe hypothermia, when your body temperature drops below 90 degrees and you stop shivering because you're about to die. The call came in on a Tuesday morning in July. Temperature was supposed to hit 85 degrees, Clear skies, perfect hiking weather. A day climber named Marcus Webb, 34 years old, experienced mountaineer from Richmond, had been found dead near the peak. The hiker who found him called it in around sunrise, voice shaking so bad we could barely understand him. "He's frozen solid," the hiker kept saying. "In this heat, he's frozen solid like it's winter up there." I figured the guy was in shock, maybe exaggerating. People see death for the first time, they don't always process it right. I grabbed my gear and headed up with Dr. Sarah Mitchell, our park meteorologist, and 2 other rangers, Tom Bradley and Jake Morrison. The hike up takes about 3 hours if you know what you're doing. The trail starts in normal Virginia forest, oak trees, thick humidity, bugs buzzing around your face. But as you climb higher, the trees change to spruce and fir, and the air gets thin and cold. Even on hot days, you need a jacket once you get above 4,000 feet. But that day felt different from the start. The animals were wrong, no birds singing, no squirrels chattering. Just dead quiet except for our boots on the trail. Sarah kept checking her instruments, frowning at the readings. "Barometric pressures all over the place," she said. "Like there's a storm coming, but the radar's completely clear." Tom Bradley's been a ranger here almost as long as me. He stopped about halfway up, looking around with that expression he gets when something's not right. "You feel that?" he asked. "Feel what?" Jake said. Jake's new, only been here 6 months. "Cold," Tom said, "like someone opened a freezer door. I felt it too. Little puffs of cold air that didn't make sense, coming from nowhere and disappearing just as quick." But the thermometer still read 72 degrees. When we reached the peak area, we saw Marcus Webb. He was sitting upright against a boulder, arms stretched out like he was hugging someone. His skin was blue-white, covered in frost crystals that glittered in the sunlight. Ice had formed in his hair, his eyebrows, around his mouth. His eyes were wide open, staring at something we couldn't see, and there was almost a smile on his face. In 80-degree weather, he was frozen solid as a block of ice. I've seen plenty of hypothermia deaths, but nothing like this. When your body temperature drops, you go through stages. First you shiver. Then you get confused, start making bad decisions. Your muscles get stiff. Eventually you stop shivering because your body doesn't have energy left, and that's when you're in real trouble. But this guy looked like he'd been flash frozen. No signs of the usual hypothermia progression. No evidence he'd tried to warm himself or find shelter. He just sat there with his arms out, frozen solid while hugging empty air. Sarah was taking temperature readings all around the body, shaking her head at her instruments. "This doesn't make sense," she kept saying. "Ambient air temperature is 79 degrees, ground temperature 76. But there's frost all over him." I knelt down to examine the body. That's when I felt it, a cold so intense it was like sticking my hand in a freezer. The air around Marcus Webb was maybe 20 degrees, even though 3 feet away it was hot summer weather. "Tom, come feel this," I called. Tom walked over and immediately stepped back. "Jesus Christ, Sam, what could cause that?" Jake was taking pictures for the investigation file. Through his camera viewfinder, he stopped and stared. "Guys, you need to see this." He showed us the camera's LCD screen. In the photo, there was a faint white shape behind Marcus, like someone in a dress standing right behind him. But when we looked with our naked eyes, nothing was there. "Camera malfunction," I said, but my voice didn't sound as sure as I wanted it to. "Doctor." Mitchell was getting more agitated by the minute. "The localized temperature differential is impossible," she said. "You can't have a 20-degree pocket of air in summer conditions without a massive weather system, and there's nothing on radar for 200 miles. That's when our radios started acting up. Instead of clear communication with base camp, we were getting static filled with what sounded like wind howling. But there was no wind where we stood. I tried to call down to headquarters. "Mount Rogers Base, this is Blackthorn at the peak. Do you copy?" What came back through the radio made my blood run cold. Mixed in with the static was a woman's voice, so faint I almost missed it. "Come closer, so cold, need warmth." "Did you guys hear that?" I asked. "Hear what?" Tom said. "Just static." But Jake had gone pale. "I heard it too. Sounded like someone calling for help. I've investigated strange deaths before. Usually there's an explanation: medical emergency, equipment failure, bad weather that came up fast. But Marcus Webb had perfect gear, perfect health, according to his emergency contact, and perfect weather conditions. The only thing that made sense was that something had sucked the heat right out of his body. We spent 2 hours documenting everything, taking measurements, photographing the scene. The whole time, that pocket of freezing air stayed right around the body. Our breath became visible when we got close, like we were outside in January instead of July in Virginia. Tom found Marcus's journal in his backpack. The last entry was from that morning. Asterisk, beautiful day for a climb. Saw the most gorgeous woman on the trail, around 4,000 feet, white dress, long dark hair. She waved at me from up ahead. Following her path to the peak. Feel like I'm meant to be here. Asterisk, he was following someone, Tom said. But we didn't pass anyone on the way up. That's when Sarah made a discovery that changed everything. She'd been taking soil temperature readings in a grid pattern around the body, and she found footprints. Not hiking boot prints, bare footprints, like someone walking without shoes. Small feet, probably a woman's. The prints led from the tree line to where Marcus was sitting, then just stopped. These are fresh, Sarah said, pointing at the impressions in the soft earth. Made today, probably within the last few hours. But here's the thing that made no sense. Wherever the footprints were, the ground temperature was 15 degrees colder than the surrounding area. It was like whoever made them was walking with frozen feet. Jake was examining the prints when he suddenly stood up fast, stumbling backward. Something just touched my neck, he said. Felt like ice cubes. We all looked around. Nothing there but empty mountain peak and clear blue sky. But the temperature was dropping. Not everywhere. Just in a circle around us, maybe 20 feet across. Our instruments were going crazy, readings jumping up and down like they couldn't decide what they were measuring. That's when I saw her for the first time. Just a glimpse, maybe 50 yards away near the tree line. A woman in a white dress, long, dark hair blowing in wind that I couldn't feel. She was beautiful, even from that distance. For just a second, she looked exactly like Lisa, like my ex-wife was standing up there on the mountain. I blinked, and she was gone. We need to get this body down the mountain, I said. Something's not right up here. But when we went to lift Marcus Webb, we couldn't. He was frozen to the rock he was sitting against, like he'd been there for months instead of hours. It took all 4 of us and our ice axes to chip him free. As we worked, I kept feeling like someone was watching us. Every time I looked up, I thought I saw movement in the trees, white fabric disappearing behind pine branches. The radio static was getting worse, and now we could all hear it. That woman's voice calling for help, calling for warmth, calling for someone to come closer. By the time we got Marcus loaded onto our emergency stretcher, the sun was starting to set. Mountain temperatures drop fast after dark, and I didn't want to be up there when it got truly cold. But as we started down the trail, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following us. Every time I looked back, the peak seemed to shimmer like heat waves, even though the air was getting colder by the minute. And that woman's voice on the radio was getting clearer. The autopsy report came back 3 days later, and it made everything worse. Dr. Patricia Chen from the State Medical Examiner's Office called me personally because she'd never seen anything like it. Samuel, this man's core body temperature was 62 degrees when we examined him, she said. That's not just fatal, that's impossible. The human body can't reach that temperature and remain intact. His blood should have crystallized, his organs should have ruptured. But everything was perfectly preserved, like he was put in a deep freezer while still alive. What about cause of death? Hypothermia, but the fastest onset I've ever documented. Based on tissue analysis, his body temperature dropped from normal to fatal in less than 30 minutes. I've seen people freeze to death in blizzards, and it takes hours. This was like someone just turned off his internal heating system. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that woman in white, how much she'd looked like Lisa from a distance. Around 2 a.m., my phone rang. It was Tom Bradley, and he sounded terrified. Sam, I'm at the hospital. Jake Morrison's in the ICU. What happened? He went back up the mountain today. By himself. Said he couldn't stop thinking about that voice on the radio. Felt like someone was calling for help and we just left them there. I drove to the hospital fast as I could. Jake was unconscious, hooked up to warming blankets and IV drips. His body temperature was 79 degrees, not fatal, but close. Doctor said they found him at the base of the mountain, walking down the trail in his underwear, mumbling about being too hot. Classic severe hypothermia behavior, the doctor explained. When your brain stops working right, you feel like you're burning up instead of freezing. People strip their clothes off right before they die. But Jake had gone up there in 90-degree weather, wearing summer hiking clothes. There was no reason for him to have hypothermia at all. When Jake woke up the next morning, what he told me made my skin crawl. "She was beautiful, Sam," he said, voice barely a whisper. "Most beautiful woman I ever saw. She was cold, said she needed warmth. I wanted to help her." "Who was she, Jake? Did you get a name?" "She looked like my ex-girlfriend Amy, exactly like her, but wrong somehow. Her skin was white as snow, and when she touched me, it was like being grabbed by winter itself. But I didn't want her to stop." Jake couldn't remember anything after that touch. Security cameras at the trailhead showed him coming down the mountain 6 hours later, half naked and hypothermic. Dr. Mitchell had been researching weather patterns around Mount Rogers, trying to find a scientific explanation for the temperature anomalies. What she found in the historical records made things worse. "Sam, there have been 37 unexplained hypothermia deaths on this mountain since 1793, she told me over coffee that week. All adult men, all alone, all during warm weather, every one, single one found in the same position, sitting upright with arms outstretched. Equipment failure? Medical conditions? That's what I thought, but I tracked down the old reports. Every one of these men was described by someone as following a woman in white up the mountain. Every one was found frozen solid in impossible weather conditions. She showed me a journal entry from 1845, written by a local minister. Asterisk, another soul lost to the ice widow this summer. Young Timothy Fletcher, age 29, followed what he described as his departed mother up the mountain path. Found 3 days later, frozen as if in the depths of winter, though the July heat was near unbearable. The mountain has a curse upon it. Of this I am certain. Asterisk. That's when I decided to research the original legend. If there was a pattern here, I needed to understand it. Eleanor Pike runs the local historical society, and she's lived in these mountains for 80 years. When I asked her about the Ice Widow, her face went dark. "My grandfather was the one who found the surveyor's body back in 1793, she said. Man named William Frost. He'd been mapping the peak for the state when a blizzard hit in October. His wife Sarah went looking for him when he didn't come home. They both died. William died in that storm, but Sarah, they never found her body. Grandfather said when he found William, the man was frozen solid, sitting upright with his arms stretched out like he was hugging someone. And there were footprints in the snow all around him, a light of small bare feet, like a woman walking without shoes." Eleanor opened an old book, showed me a hand-drawn map from 1794. "Look here, they marked the peak as Widow's Point because of what happened. Every few years after that, another man would be found the same way, always following a beautiful woman up the mountain, always found frozen in impossible conditions." "What does she want?" "Company," Eleanor said simply. "She's been alone up there for over 200 years, and she's cold, so very cold." That night, I got a call that changed everything. It was Lisa, my ex-wife, and she was crying. "Sam, something's wrong with Emma. She's been having nightmares about a lady in a white dress who wants to take Daddy away." She drew a picture of her today. Lisa texted me the picture. My 8-year-old daughter had drawn a woman in a flowing white dress standing on a mountain peak with a man walking toward her. At the bottom, in Emma's careful child handwriting, it said, "The cold lady wants Daddy to come play. Lisa, keep Emma away from the mountains. Don't let her out of your sight." "Sam, you're scaring me. What's going on up there?" But before I could answer, my radio crackled to life. That woman's voice, clearer than it had ever been. "Samuel, your family misses you. Come to the peak. I can bring them back." The voice sounded exactly like Lisa. I should have left it alone, should have requested a transfer, gotten away from Mount Rogers and whatever was living up there. But the voice on the radio kept calling, and it wasn't just using Lisa's voice anymore. Sometimes it was my daughter Emma, sometimes my mother who died when I was 12, sometimes my army buddies who froze in that helicopter crash. It was using everyone I'd ever lost. everyone I missed, promising me I could see them again if I just climbed to the peak. 3 more men died that summer, all experienced hikers, all found frozen solid in 80-degree weather, all sitting with their arms outstretched like they were hugging invisible partners. The State Park Service was getting ready to close Mount Rogers permanently, and my job was on the line. That's when I decided to go up there myself. Not for the job, not for the investigation, but because I couldn't stop hearing those voices calling my name. I went alone, against every safety protocol in the book, told Tom I was doing paperwork, told Sarah I was checking trail conditions. But really, I was answering a call I couldn't resist anymore. The hike up felt different this time. With every step, the air got colder, even though my thermometer read normal temperatures. By the time I reached 3,000 feet, my breath was visible. At 4,000 feet, frost was forming on my water bottle. That's when I saw her clearly for the first time. She was sitting on a fallen log beside the trail, wearing a white dress that looked like it was made of snow and ice. Long, dark hair, pale skin, beautiful in a way that made my chest ache. When she looked up at me, she had Lisa's face, but her eyes were like winter, cold and endless and hungry. "Hello, Samuel," she said in Lisa's voice. "I've been waiting for you." "You're not Lisa." She smiled, and her breath came out as frozen mist. "I'm whoever you need me to be. I'm whoever you've lost. I know how lonely you are, how much you miss the people who've left you behind." The cold was getting worse. Ice was forming on my jacket, on my gloves, but I didn't want to move away from her. She was beautiful and sad and familiar, and every part of me wanted to get closer. "Your ex-wife doesn't understand you," she continued, still using Lisa's voice perfectly. "Your daughter barely knows you, but I understand. I know what it's like to be alone, to be forgotten. What do you want? Company. I've been alone on this mountain for so long, Samuel, so cold and so alone. But you could stay with me. We could be together forever." She stood up and walked toward me. Where her bare feet touched the ground, ice spread out in delicate patterns like frozen flowers. When she reached out to touch my face, her fingers were like icicles, but I didn't pull away. "I can take away all your pain," she whispered. "All your loneliness, all your guilt about the men who died in Alaska, about losing your family, about not being enough. I can make it all stop." Her touch was spreading cold through my body, but it felt good somehow, like sinking into a warm bath, except backwards. The cold was numbing everything, the pain, the guilt, the constant ache of missing people I'd lost. "That's it," she said. "Just let go. Let the cold take you. We'll be together always." I was slipping away, feeling my body temperature dropping, my thoughts getting fuzzy. But then I heard something that cut through the cold like a knife. Emma's voice, but not from the Ice Widow. It was coming from my radio, my real radio, the one connected to the outside world. Tom Bradley was trying to reach me. "Sam, if you can hear this, your daughter's in the hospital, some kind of accident. Lisa's asking for you." The Ice Widow's grip tightened on me. "Don't listen," she said, but her voice was changing, becoming something else. "Stay with me. She doesn't need you." But I could hear Emma crying in the background of Tom's radio call, asking for her daddy. And suddenly I understood what the Ice Widow really was. She wasn't just lonely, she was selfish. She was taking fathers away from their children, husbands away from their wives, using their loneliness to feed her own need for company. "No," I said, and started fighting the cold. The Ice Widow's beautiful face twisted into something horrible. Her skin became white as bone, her eyes like black ice, her fingers like frozen claws. "You can't leave me," she snarled. "No one leaves me alone again." The temperature around us dropped so fast that the trees started cracking from the cold. Ice formed on everything. The rocks, the ground, my equipment, but I kept thinking about Emma, about how much she needed her father, about how I couldn't abandon her the way this thing had been abandoned. "I'm not staying," I said through chattering teeth. "My daughter needs me." "Your daughter will forget you," the Ice Widow screamed. "Everyone forgets, everyone leaves, but I won't let you go." She wrapped her arms around me, and it was like being hugged by winter itself. Ice spread across my jacket, my skin, my hair. I could feel my body shutting down, my heart slowing, my blood getting thick and cold. But I kept thinking about Emma, about reading her bedtime stories, about teaching her to ride a bike, about all the things I still wanted to do with her. That love, that responsibility, that connection to the living world. It was warm in a way the Ice Widow couldn't understand or steal. Love isn't about holding on, I gasped. It's about letting go when you need to. And I pulled away from her. The Ice Widow screamed, a sound like wind through ice caves, like the mountain itself crying out in pain. The supernatural cold shattered around us, and suddenly I could move again. I ran. Down the mountain, slipping on ice that shouldn't exist, while behind me the Ice Widow's voice followed. You'll be back, Samuel. They all come back. Loneliness always wins in the end. By the time I reached the trailhead, I was hypothermic but alive. Tom Bradley found me in the parking lot, blue-lipped and shivering, and rushed me to the hospital. Emma was okay, just a broken arm from falling off her bike. But when I saw her in that hospital bed, hugging her with my still cold hands, I knew I'd made the right choice. The Ice Widow was still up there, still calling, still lonely, but she wasn't my problem anymore. I requested a transfer the next week. Lisa and I worked out a better custody arrangement, and I took a job with the Virginia State Parks in a nice, flat area with no mountains and no unexplained deaths. Emma's doing great. The nightmares stopped the day I came down from Mount Rogers for the last time. But the Ice Widow didn't stop. 2 months after I left, another hiker was found frozen solid on the peak. 36-year-old divorced, father of 2, found sitting upright with his arms stretched out, frozen solid in 78-degree weather. Tom Bradley called to tell me about it. Same as all the others, he said. Man was seen following a beautiful woman up the trail. Radio communications showed him talking to someone, saying he was going to see his ex-wife even though she lives in California. The state closed Mount Rogers to solo hikers after that. They put up warning signs about unpredictable weather conditions and required all climbers to go in groups of 3 or more. It helped some, but not completely. See, the thing about loneliness is that it finds a way. Men still go up there alone sometimes, ignoring the rules, drawn by voices on the radio that sound like people they've lost. The Ice Widow is patient. She's been waiting for over 200 years, and Liza's 317.9. She can wait longer. I've heard from other park rangers since then, from other places. Turns out there are things like the Ice Widow all over the country, things that feed on isolation, on the pain of being alone. A park ranger in Montana told me about something in Glacier National Park that appears as missing children to draw parents into avalanche zones. Another ranger in Colorado described an entity that looks like dead spouses, leading grieving widows and widowers off cliff edges. They all feed on the same thing, the human need for connection, twisted into something deadly. The official reports always list these deaths as accidents, equipment failure, medical emergencies, unexpected weather. The Park Service doesn't want people to know that some places are just hungry, and they'll use your love against you to fill their emptiness. But I know the truth. There are things out there that prey on broken hearts and lonely souls. They'll wear the faces of everyone you've ever lost, speak in voices you've dreamed of hearing again, promise you everything you think you want. The key is remembering what you actually have. The people who are still alive still need you, still. I love you even when things get complicated. Those connections, the real ones, the messy and difficult and human ones, they're stronger than any supernatural hunger. I still get calls sometimes from Mount Rogers. Tom Bradley keeps me updated on the investigations. 3 more deaths this year, all the same pattern. And sometimes, late at night when I'm checking on Emma or having coffee with Lisa as we figure out this co-parenting thing, my old radio picks up transmissions from that mountain. The Ice Widow's voice, calling my name, telling me how lonely she is, how much she misses me, how she's waiting for me to come back. But I don't listen anymore. I turn off the radio and focus on the people who are actually here, the relationships that are real and complicated and worth the work. Because loneliness kills faster than cold, and the best way to fight it isn't to chase after what you've lost, it's to hold on to what you still have. The Ice Widow is still up there on Mount Rogers, still waiting, still calling to lonely men with voices they want to hear. But she's not calling to me anymore. I'm not alone. My name is Beth Morrison, and I've been a park ranger at Seneca Rocks for 12 years. People always ask me what it's like being a woman in this job, especially since I'm the only female ranger who leads mountain rescues. The truth is, after pulling 89 people off these cliffs, 15 of them from the main rock face, I've earned my place here. The mountain doesn't care what gender you are when someone's hanging by a rope 200 feet up. I wasn't always a ranger. Used to be a geology professor at West Virginia University until my husband died in a climbing accident up in New Hampshire. After that, sitting in a classroom talking about rocks felt pointless. I wanted to be out here with them, helping people stay alive on them. My twin boys, Jake and Sam, were only 3 when I made the switch. Now they're 12 and begging me to teach them how to climb. Seneca Rocks isn't like other climbing spots. It's a 900-foot wall of quartzite that shoots straight up from the valley floor like a giant's blade stuck in the earth. The rock formation runs north to south, catching light different ways throughout the day. Morning climbers get the golden east face. Evening climbers work the shadowed west side. It's beautiful in a way that makes your chest tight. The locals have always been weird about the rocks. Old-timers in the valley still call them the Crying Stones. They say the Seneca tribe considered this place sacred, that the rocks were guardians or something. German settlers back in the 1700s wrote about hearing screams from the cliff face at night. I always figured it was just wind through the cracks, maybe some acoustic thing with the quartzite. What bothered me more than old stories were the numbers. Since the 1,960 seconds, we've had 23 climbing deaths at Seneca Rocks. That might not sound like much, but for a formation this popular with relatively easy routes, it's high. Most climbing areas our size see maybe 1 death every few years. We average one every 18 months. I kept detailed records of every accident, equipment failure, weather changes, climber error. There was always an explanation. Mountains don't hunt people. People make mistakes. They get overconfident, skip safety checks, push beyond their limits. The rock just sits there. It doesn't care if you live or die. My office sits in a small building at the base of the rocks, next to the parking area where climbers gather every morning. Through my window, I can see the main climbing routes: Old Man's Route, Solar, Gunsight to South Peak. I know every handhold on those walls, every place where the rock crumbles, every ledge where someone might get stuck. The morning everything changed started like any other. Coffee at 5:30, gear check at 6, radio test with the other rangers at 6:15. The weather was perfect. Clear skies, light wind, temperature in the mid-70s. Perfect climbing weather brings out everyone from beginners to experts. I was updating rescue equipment inventory when my radio crackled. "Beth, this is dispatch. We need you at grid 7 to 7 immediately. Possible climbing fatality." Grid 7 to 7 was halfway up the east face, on what we call the Beginner's Traverse. It's rated 5.4, which means most people who've been climbing for 6 months can handle it safely. Not the kind of route where people die. Copy that. Equipment needed? Full rescue kit. Coroner's already en route. I grabbed my gear, 200 feet of 11mm dynamic rope, black diamond rack, Petzl headlamp, first aid kit, digital camera for documentation. The hike to the base of grid 7 to 7 takes about 20 minutes through dense forest. Normally I enjoy that walk, but something felt wrong that morning. The birds weren't singing. I found the victim before the coroner arrived. David Chen, 28 years old, climbing guide from Virginia Beach. I'd met him twice before. Solid climber, cautious. The kind of guy who checked his gear 3 times before starting a route. He'd been leading a group of beginners up the traverse. David was hanging about 60 feet up the cliff face, but not from his rope. He was pressed against the rock wall like he'd been glued there, arms spread wide, face turned upward. His climbing rope hung loose beside him, cut clean through the middle. His expression was pure terror, mouth open, eyes wide. Whatever killed him, he saw it coming. I rappelled down from above to get a closer look. The position was impossible. No hand holds where his left hand gripped the rock. No foothold supporting his weight. He was just stuck there, like the mountain was holding him. "Beth?" The coroner's voice echoed up from below. "What do you see?" "Give me a minute." I checked his gear first. Harness intact, helmet undamaged, chalk bag still attached to his belt. His rope had been cut with something incredibly sharp. The ends were clean, not frayed like they'd snap under pressure. but there were no sharp edges on this section of cliff. I knew every inch of this wall. That's when I noticed the wear pattern on his climbing shoes. The rubber soles were scraped in a specific pattern, like he'd been climbing the same section over and over. But that didn't make sense. The traverse is a straight shot across the cliff face. You don't repeat sections. I took photos with my digital camera, but something was wrong with it. Every shot showed empty rock wall, even though David was right there in front of me. I tried different angles, checked the camera settings, even used my phone. Same result. Pictures of blank cliff face. Equipment malfunction? I radioed down, switching to manual documentation. While I sketched the scene in my notebook, I started hearing things. Echoes that didn't match my voice. When I called down to the coroner, my words came back as 3 different voices, overlapping. When he called up to me, the echo sounded like children crying. I've worked these rocks for 12 years. I know their acoustic properties. Single voices don't become multiple voices. Echoes don't sound like crying children. My altimeter started acting up too. It read 900 feet, then 1,000, 200, then negative 50 feet, all while I hung in the same spot. The needle spun like a compass near a magnet. By the time I got David's body down, I had more questions than answers. The coroner, a guy named Martinez who'd worked with me on 15 other climbing accidents, looked shaken. "I've never seen anything like this," he said, examining the rope. "This cut is perfectly straight, like someone used a laser." "Any ideas on how he stayed attached to the wall?" Martinez shook his head. "Without equipment? Without handholds? Impossible. People don't stick to vertical rock faces." That afternoon, I hiked back up to grid 7 to 7 alone. I wanted to understand what happened, find some rational explanation. The more I looked at the evidence, the less sense it made. That's when I found the petroglyphs. 200 feet up the cliff face, carved deep into the quartzite, were symbols I'd never seen before. They looked old, weathered edges, lichen growing in the grooves, but they weren't in any of our geological surveys. I'd studied every inch of these rocks for my geology degree. These carvings were new. Or maybe they'd been hidden and something had revealed them. The symbols showed human figures climbing upward, but they were being pulled off the rock by something with long arms and a huge mouth. At the bottom of the carving was a figure made of geometric shapes, angular, inhuman, with what looked like sound waves coming from its mouth. I touched one of the symbols and jerked my hand back. The stone was warm, like it had been sitting in direct sunlight, even though that section of cliff face had been in shadow all day. When I looked at my hand, there were scratches on my palm that matched the symbol I'd touched. On the hike down, my radio started picking up interference. Static, mixed with what sounded like voices, speaking in a language I didn't recognize. Every few minutes, the voices would stop, and there would be a sound like screaming, but distorted, like it was coming from underwater. Back at the ranger station, I called my boys to check in. They were safe at their after-school program, 40 miles away. But when I hung up, I could swear I heard their voices still coming through the radio static. That night, I reviewed every climbing accident report from the past 5 years, looking for patterns I might have missed, equipment failures that didn't make sense, witness statements that mentioned unusual sounds or sights. What I found made my stomach cold. In 7 of the 23 accidents, witnesses reported hearing strange echoes or voices from the rocks. In 4 cases, climbers mentioned seeing shadows moving on the cliff face when no one was there. 3 reports described finding victims in impossible positions with no explanation for how they got there. I dismissed all of this as trauma responses, shock making people see things that weren't there. People in crisis don't make reliable witnesses. But now, sitting in my office with David Chen's case file open, surrounded by photos that showed empty cliff faces instead of bodies, I was starting to think the witnesses were the only ones telling the truth. The next morning brought news that made me sick. 3 more climbing accidents overnight, all on different routes, all experienced climbers. The FBI was sending a team to investigate possible serial killings. Sarah Williams, 35, found at the base of Solar with no climbing equipment, but rope burns on her hands, suggesting she'd rappelled down without gear. Marcus Rodriguez, 42, discovered hanging from the gunsight approach, alive but catatonic, speaking only to say it came from inside the stone. Jennifer Park, 29, found on a ledge 60 feet up Old Man's Route, insisting she'd been climbing at ground level when the mountain moved. I spent the morning rappelling to each scene, documenting everything. The same impossible positions, the same terror in the survivors' faces, the same equipment failures that made no mechanical sense. But it was what happened during Marcus Rodriguez's rescue that broke my skepticism. I was setting up a haul system to bring him down when I heard children calling my name. Not just any children, Jake and Sam, my twins. Their voices were coming from inside the cliff face, muffled like they were trapped in a cave. "Mom, Mom, help us." I pressed my ear against the rock. The voices were definitely coming from inside solid quartzite, which was impossible. Sound doesn't travel through solid rock that way. But I could hear them clearly, crying, scared, calling for me. My hands were shaking as I radioed the ranger station. "This is Beth. Check on my boys immediately. Emergency. Copy that. Stand by." The longest 5 minutes of my life. During that time, I could hear Jake and Sam getting farther away, their voices fading deeper into the stone. "Beth, your boys are fine. They're in their classroom, 40 miles away. Teacher confirmed they've been there all morning." I stared at the rock face where their voices had been coming from. A section of cliff that had stood unchanged for millions of years. That afternoon, the FBI team arrived. Special Agent Mills, a serious woman in her 40s who'd investigated serial killings in national parks before. She interviewed me for 2 hours, focusing on any climbers who'd seemed suspicious, any pattern in the victims' backgrounds. "All expert climbers," she noted, "all familiar with these rocks. That suggests someone with intimate knowledge of climbing techniques. Or something that's... I've been watching climbers for a long time," I said. She looked at me sharply. "Something?" Before I could answer, her radio squawked. "Agent Mills, we have a situation. Security cameras picked up someone climbing at night, no safety equipment." We reviewed the footage at the Park Service building. Grainy black and white video showing a figure moving up the east face at 2 a.m, climbing without ropes or protection, moving impossibly fast. The figure looked like me. Same height, same build, same long dark hair. But I'd been home that night, asleep in my cabin. The timestamp on the video matched my cell phone records, showing I'd been 40 miles away. "Do you have a twin sister?" Agent Mills asked. "No." "Any explanation for this?" I watched myself on the security monitor, climbing routes I'd never attempted, moving like I'd been doing it for decades instead of years. The figure on screen moved with inhuman speed and precision, fingers finding hand, holds in complete darkness. None that makes sense. That evening, Dr. Samuel Reeves arrived. The park's consulting archaeologist, called in because of the petroglyphs I'd discovered. Sam was in his 60s, had worked with Native American tribes throughout Appalachia for 30 years. "These symbols are Seneca," he confirmed after examining my photos. "But they shouldn't exist here." "Why not?" "The Seneca were driven out of this area in 1754. They never had time to create permanent rock art. These symbols suggest a much longer presence." Sam pulled out a thick folder of tribal histories and archaeological reports. There are stories, though, oral traditions from the Seneca Nation about a sacred site in the eastern mountains, a place where one of their shamans merged with the stone to become an eternal guardian. Merged with the stone? Transformed himself into a rock spirit to protect the burial grounds of his people. The stories say he became something between human and mountain, bound to the cliff face but able to move through it like water. Sam showed me photos of similar petroglyphs found in other locations. The figure at the bottom of your carving? That's the shaman after his transformation. The Seneca called him "he who cries from stone." And the other figures being pulled off the cliff? Warnings. The stories say the guardian would tolerate respectful visitors, but anyone who disturbed the sacred sites or showed disrespect to the mountain would be removed permanently. I thought about David Chen's expression, the terror in his frozen face. How would he remove them? The traditional stories mention a scream that could shake rocks loose, disorient climbers, make them lose their grip on reality as well as the stone. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed at the ranger station, monitoring radio traffic and security cameras. If something was hunting on my mountain, I wanted to know about it. At 2:17 a.m., Every electronic device in the building started malfunctioning. Radios filled with static and voices speaking Seneca. Computer screens flickered between normal displays and images of the cliff face. The security cameras showed the rocks crawling with shadows that moved independent of any light source. Then I heard the screaming. Not human screaming. Something else, like stone grinding against stone, but pitched high enough to make my teeth ache. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once: the walls, the floor, the air itself. When I looked out the window, I saw a massive shadow moving across the cliff face. Not cast by anything I could see, but moving with purpose, climbing upward with impossible speed. The shadow was shaped like a human, but 12 feet tall, with arms that stretched too long and fingers that could grip the tiniest cracks in the stone. As I watched, the shadow stopped climbing and turned toward my building. I couldn't see features, but I felt it, looking at me, looking into me, measuring something about me that I couldn't understand. Then it merged with the cliff face and disappeared. I spent the rest of the night with every light in the building turned on, checking and rechecking the radio, waiting for dawn. When the sun finally came up, I found my truck's tires had been slashed. Not cut, crushed, like something incredibly heavy had stepped on them. The metal rims were embedded 2 inches deep in solid asphalt. In the asphalt around my truck were footprints, human-shaped but 18 inches long, pressed so deep into the pavement they looked like they'd been made when the asphalt was soft. The prints led from my truck to the base of the cliff face, where they simply stopped. Agent Mills called an emergency meeting that morning. The FBI team, park officials, Dr. Reeves and me gathered in the conference room while outside. News vans lined the access road. "We're dealing with something outside normal. Investigative protocols," Mills announced. 4 more incidents last night at climbing areas within a 50-mile radius. All the same pattern: expert climbers found in impossible positions, equipment failures that don't make mechanical sense. "Any theories?" asked the park superintendent. "Dr. Reeves has discovered some historical context that might be relevant." Sam spread out maps and tribal documents across the table. This entire ridge was a sacred burial ground for the Seneca tribe. According to oral histories, when they were forced out in 1754, their chief shaman performed a ritual to protect the burial sites permanently. "What kind of ritual?" I asked. "He transformed himself into a stone guardian. The ritual required him to give up his human form and merge with the mountain itself. In exchange, he would have the power to protect the sacred sites for eternity." Agent Mills looked skeptical. "You're suggesting a supernatural entity is killing climbers?" "I'm suggesting we're dealing with something that believes climbers are desecrating sacred ground," Sam replied. "The recent increase in climbing activity may have triggered a protective response." "Recent increase?" I asked. Sam nodded. "Climbing permits for Seneca rocks have tripled in the past 2 years. Social media exposure, climbing magazines featuring the area. What was once a quiet local climbing spot is now a destination." Before anyone could respond, my radio crackled with an emergency call. "All units, we have climbers in distress on the east face. Multiple people climbing without equipment, not responding to verbal contact." Through the conference room window, I could see them. 12 people, including Agent Mills's partner, walking toward the cliff face like they were in a trance. No gear, no ropes, just walking directly toward 900 feet of vertical stone. "That's Agent Peterson," Mills said, standing up fast. He was supposed to be interviewing witnesses in town. I grabbed my gear and headed for the door. If that thing is calling people to climb, they'll all die when they try it without equipment. The base of the east face was chaos. Climbers, FBI agents, and random tourists were all walking toward the stone wall with blank expressions. Men, women, teenagers, all moving with the same slow, purposeful gait. "Hey!" I yelled at Agent Peterson. "Stop!" He looked right through me and kept walking. When he reached the cliff face, he started climbing bare-handed. No technique, no safety awareness, just pulling himself up the rock like he'd been doing it his whole life. Others followed. A teenage girl who'd been interviewing with the FBI. A park maintenance worker who'd never climbed anything more challenging than a ladder. An elderly tourist who needed a cane to walk. They were all climbing faster than they should have been able to, finding handholds and sections of cliff I knew were smooth, moving with coordination that suggested something else was controlling their movements. "We need to stop them," Agent Mills said, pulling on a climbing harness. "No, Doctor." Reeves grabbed her arm. "If you go up there, it'll take control of you too. This is a summoning." "A what?" "The Guardian is calling people to the sacred site. If you approach with hostile intent, you'll become part of it." I watched 12 people climbing towards certain death and felt something break inside me. These were innocent people. They didn't understand what they were walking into. There has to be a way to stop this. Sam was flipping through his research notes. The oral traditions mention offerings, respectful approach, recognition of the sacred nature of the site. What kind of offerings? Return of disturbed items, formal acknowledgement of trespass, promise to restore proper protocols. I looked at the people climbing higher and higher up the cliff face. In 10 minutes, they'd be too high to survive a fall. "I'm going up there." "Beth, no," Agent Mills said. "If that thing takes control of you, it won't." I hoped I was right. I know these rocks better than anyone. If there's a way to communicate with whatever's up there, I'll find it. I started climbing the east face, following the route the entranced climbers had taken. But instead of climbing with aggressive speed, I moved slowly, respectfully, the way I'd learned from old Seneca climbing techniques Sam had shown me. At every handhold, I paused and pressed my palm against the stone. "I respect this place," I said out loud. "I understand it's sacred. I'm not here to take anything or disturb anything. I'm here to talk." The rock felt warm under my hands, warmer than sun-heated stone should feel. And I could swear I felt a pulse in it, like a slow heartbeat running through the entire cliff face. 50 feet up, I heard the screaming start. Not the human kind. The other kind, like a grinding stone, but pitched to make your bones hurt. The sound was coming from inside the cliff face, vibrating through the rock into my hands and feet. The entranced climbers stopped moving and turned to look at me. Their eyes were completely black, reflecting no light. When they opened their mouths, the stone-grinding scream came out of them instead of human voices. That's when I saw it fully for the first time. The stone screamer emerged from the cliff face like he was made of the same rock, flowing out of solid quartzite without leaving a mark. 12 feet tall, humanoid but wrong, with arms that stretched too long and fingers that ended in stone points. His face was carved from the same quartzite as the mountain, but the eyes glowed with amber light. When he opened his mouth, the scream that came out hit me like a physical force. I felt my grip on the rock loosening, my vision blurring, my sense of balance shifting. But I didn't let go. "I know who you are," I called out over the screaming. "I know what you're protecting. I'm not here to disturb it." The screamer tilted his massive stone head and studied me. The amber eyes were ancient, intelligent, and completely inhuman. "I want to help," I continued. "These people don't understand what this place means. They're not trying to disrespect your sacred sites. They just don't know." The screaming stopped. In the sudden silence, I could hear my own heart hammering and the sound of loose rock falling from somewhere above. When the screamer spoke, his voice came from inside the mountain itself, vibrating through the stone. "Too many come. Too many disturb the rest of my people. They climb for sport where warriors are buried. They shout and laugh above sacred ground." "Then teach us," I said. "Show us how to approach respectfully. We can work together to protect this place." The screamer considered this, his amber eyes fixed on me. Around us, the entranced climbers hung, motionless on the cliff face, waiting for his decision. "You speak truth, but others will not listen. The easy path is to remove all who climb." Above me, Agent Peterson lost his grip and started to fall. Without thinking, I swung over and caught his wrist, taking his full weight on my own grip. My arm socket screamed in protest. "I can teach them," I gasped, struggling to hold both our weights. "Give me the chance." The screamer moved closer, flowing through the rock like it was water. Up close, I could see that his stone skin was carved with the same symbols I'd found in the petroglyphs. The story of his transformation, written on his body. "Prove your respect," he said. "Remove the metal from the sacred stone. Return what has been taken. Establish proper protocols for approach." "I will." The screamer reached out with one massive stone finger and touched my forehead. Images flooded my mind: the location of the burial caves, the proper ceremonies for requesting permission to climb, the offerings needed to show respect. When the visions ended, I found myself standing on solid ground at the base of the cliff. Agent Peterson and the other entranced climbers were beside me, all unconscious but breathing. The screamer was gone, but his voice echoed from the stone one last time. "One chance, Stonewalker. Fail, and I will make this mountain barren of human footsteps forever." That was 6 months ago. The changes we've made since then would sound impossible if you hadn't lived through what I lived through. Working with the Seneca Nation, we established new protocols for accessing the climbing areas. Every climbing group now starts with a brief ceremony acknowledging the sacred nature of the site. We've removed all the permanent hardware from traditional climbing routes: 5-pace, no more metal bolts or anchors driven into the sacred stone. The burial caves Dr. Reeves found have been properly sealed and marked. Climbing is prohibited within a 100-foot radius of any burial site. During certain times of year that the tribe considers sacred, entire sections of the cliff face are closed to climbing. The results speak for themselves. 0 climbing accidents since we implemented the new protocols. Not one. The stone screamer is still there. Climbers occasionally report seeing a massive shadow moving across the cliff face, but only when someone violates the protocols. A reminder that the mountain is watching. My hearing never fully recovered from that sonic attack. I wear hearing aids now, and I still get vertigo episodes when I'm up high. Small prices to pay for being alive and keeping others alive. Agent Mills transferred to a different division. She told me privately that the FBI created a new classification for cases like ours: environmental protection incidents with unknown causative factors. Apparently, we're not the only park dealing with ancient guardians waking up as wilderness areas face increased human pressure. My boys finally got their climbing lessons, but not the way they expected. They learned traditional Seneca climbing techniques from tribal elders, including the proper ceremonies and respect protocols. They understand that every mountain has its own rules, and those rules existed long before humans invented metal gear and safety ratings. I still work these rocks every day, but I'm more than a ranger now. I'm a bridge between the old ways and the new, helping climbers understand that some places demand more than technical skill, they demand reverence. Last week, a climbing magazine wanted to do a feature on our revolutionary safety protocols. I turned them down. Some stories aren't meant for mass consumption. Some truths work better when shared person to person, climber to climber, with respect for what you might not understand. The rocks still call to people, but now they call with invitation instead of hunger, as long as you approach with the right spirit. Every morning, when I look up at that 900-foot wall of quartzite, I remember the screamer's final words to me. One chance. We took it, and it worked. But I also remember the amber eyes watching from the stone, patient and eternal, waiting to see if we'll keep our promises. The mountain remembers everything. Every climber who shows proper respect, every one who doesn't. Every metal bolt we remove, every ceremony we perform, every moment we choose reverence over conquest. If you ever find yourself at the base of Seneca Rocks, planning to climb those ancient walls, remember this. You're not just a climber there. You're a guest. Act like one. The stone is always listening. My name is Jennifer Moonfeather, and I've been a park ranger at Cumberland Falls for 9 years. Most folks just call me Jenny. I'm Cherokee, and my grandmother used to tell me stories about these falls when I was little. She said they were sacred, that the moon bow was a bridge to the spirit world. I always figured it was just beautiful folklore. The falls are something special, I'll give you that. 125 feet wide, dropping 68 feet into the Cumberland River Gorge. On clear nights when the moon is full, you can see something most people never witness in their whole lives: a moonbow. It's like a regular rainbow, but made of moonlight instead of sunlight, white and ghostly, arcing through the mist. The Cherokee called this place Great Falls, and they believed it was where spirits crossed between worlds. I'm a water safety specialist. In 9 years, I've pulled 52 people out of these waters. I know every current, every hidden rock, every dangerous spot where tourists might get themselves in trouble. I've got twin daughters, Sarah and Maya, who are 8 years old. Their father left when they were babies, so it's just us 3. The Park Service gave me a chance when other places wouldn't hire a single Cherokee mother, so I work hard to prove I belong here. The drowning started about 3 years ago. 19 people since 1989, which isn't normal for a waterfall this size. Most of them were experienced swimmers who got caught in currents they should have been able to handle. The Cherokee stories always said the falls would protect themselves from people who didn't show proper respect, but I never put much stock in old legends. Water is water. Physics is physics. Until last Tuesday. I was doing my evening patrol when my radio crackled to life. "Jenny, we need you at the main viewing platform. Emergency situation." It was Tom Bradley, our park superintendent. His voice had that tight sound it gets when something's really wrong. I found him standing next to the Moonbow viewing area with 2 state police officers. Below us, the rescue team was pulling a body from the water. The victim was Marcus Webb, a nature photographer from Louisville. Experienced guy, been coming here for years to photograph the Moonbow. Good swimmer too. I'd seen him wade out into the shallows before to get the perfect shot. "What happened?" I asked Tom. "That's what we're trying to figure out." Officer Martinez pointed to Webb's camera equipment scattered on the rocks. His camera bag is bone dry, but he was found floating face down in 18 inches of water. No signs of a struggle, no medical emergency according to the EMTs. I looked at the scene. Webb's tripod was set up perfectly for Moonbow photography. His backup camera was sitting on a dry rock, lens cap still on. The man had drowned in water so shallow I could stand in it without getting my knees wet. "Any witnesses?" I asked. "Just the couple who found him," Martinez said. "They were watching the Moonbow when they heard splashing. By the time they got down here, he was already floating. I stared at the water. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. The Moonbow was visible tonight, bright and clear, exactly the way photographers love it. Webb should have been in heaven, not drowning in puddle-deep water." "Jenny," Tom said quietly, "I need you to look at this from a cultural perspective. We've had more incidents during Moonbow viewing than any other time. The Cherokee connection. Maybe there's something we're missing." I wanted to tell him that being Cherokee didn't make me an expert on supernatural drownings. My grandmother's stories were just stories, but looking at Webb's body being loaded into the ambulance, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October air. The Moonbow hung in the mist above us, beautiful and terrible. For just a second, I could have sworn I saw a figure standing in the middle of it, tall, wearing traditional Cherokee dress, made of water and light. But when I blinked, there was nothing but rainbow mist. "I'll look into it," I told Tom. "Let me check our incident reports, see if there's a pattern." That night, I went home to my little house near the park and spread 23 incident reports across my kitchen table. Webb made 19 drownings in 3 years, plus 4 other accidents that didn't result in death. Sarah and Maya were asleep in their room, and the house was quiet except for the distant sound of the falls. Every single incident happened during Moonbow conditions. Every victim had been alone when they entered the water, and every one of them had been taking pictures or videos of the Moonbow for commercial purposes, selling prints, stock photography, tourism websites. I thought about my grandmother's voice. "The Moonbow is sacred, Jenny. It's not meant to be bought and sold." But that was just superstition, wasn't it? The next morning, I decided to investigate the scene properly. I brought my water testing kit and measuring tools, thinking maybe there was a hidden current or temperature variation that could explain the drownings. The scientific approach, I flanned. That's what I'd been trained for. The viewing platform was empty except for Dr. Robert Kim, our park naturalist. He was crouched by the water's edge, looking puzzled. "Morning, Robert. Finding anything interesting?" He looked up at me with worried eyes. "Jenny, have you noticed the wildlife behavior lately? Around the falls, I mean." "Can't say I have." "Why?" "They're avoiding this area completely. Deer won't come to drink, birds won't roost in the trees nearby. I've been tracking animal patterns for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like it. It's like they're afraid of something." I set down my equipment and pulled out my thermometer. Well, let's see what the water has to say. The first reading was normal, 56 degrees, typical for October. But when I moved the thermometer 3 feet to the left, it dropped to 42 degrees. 3 feet to the right, it shot up to 68 degrees. That wasn't possible. Water temperature doesn't vary by 26 degrees in a space smaller than my living room. Robert, look at this. I showed him the readings. He frowned and pulled out his own thermometer. Same results. Different spots in the same pool showed wildly different temperatures, with no pattern I could understand. Equipment malfunction? He suggested. Maybe. But I'd checked my thermometer that morning. It was working fine. I moved to the depth measurements. According to our charts, the area where Webb drowned should be 18 to 20 inches deep. My measuring stick said 22 inches on the first try, 18 inches on the second, 14 inches on the third. Same exact spot. The water level can't be changing that fast, I muttered. Unless something's affecting the current flow, Robert said, but he didn't sound convinced. I was about to try a fourth measurement when I heard it. Voices speaking in Cherokee, coming from the direction of the falls. The words were faint but clear. Sacred waters. Guardian's duty. Respect the bridge. Did you hear that? I asked Robert. Hear what? The voices stopped. I looked around, but we were alone on the platform. The nearest Cherokee speakers lived 50 miles away, and I hadn't heard a car pull up. Nothing. Just, thought I heard something. I packed up my equipment, feeling unsettled. The scientific approach wasn't giving me answers. It was giving me more questions. As we walked back toward the visitor center, I noticed something I'd missed before. Near the spot where Webb's camera had been found, someone had arranged 7 smooth river stones in a perfect circle. They looked old, worn by water, but the arrangement was fresh. Robert, were those stones there yesterday? He looked where I was pointing. I don't think so. Want me to move them? No, I said quickly, surprising myself. Leave them alone. That evening, I called my mother in Oklahoma. She still lived on the reservation where I grew up, and she knew the old stories better than anyone. Mom, tell me about the Moonbow Guardian again, the story Grandma used to tell. Jenny, what's wrong? You sound worried. Just humor me, please. She was quiet for a moment. Your grandmother, said the Cherokee, who lived near Cumberland Falls, had a sacred duty. Every generation, someone was chosen to protect the Moonbow Bridge. The spirit world and our world touch at that place, and it needs protection. When the Cherokee were forced to leave in 1838, the last guardian put a curse on anyone who would try to profit from the sacred site. A curse? Death by drowning for those who showed no respect. But Jenny, those are just old stories. Why are you asking? I told her about the incidents, about Webb, about the impossible water temperatures and depths. She listened without interrupting. Jenny, she said finally, maybe it's time you listen to your grandmother's voice. Some things can't be measured with scientific instruments. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I got up and drove back to the falls. I told myself I was just doing a security check, making sure no late-night visitors were putting themselves in danger. But really, I needed to see the Moonbow for myself. To understand what was happening, the park was closed to visitors, so I had the viewing platform to myself. The moon was 3/4 full, bright enough to create a faint moonbow in the mist. I stood there for 10 minutes, just watching the play of light on water. Then I saw her, a woman standing on the surface of the water, right in the middle of the falls. She was tall and graceful, wearing traditional Cherokee dress, a long skirt and blouse that seemed to be made of flowing water. Her hair moved like river current, and her skin gleamed with the same light as the moonbow. She looked directly at me and spoke in Cherokee. You have the sight, daughter. You can see the truth. I blinked hard, thinking I was hallucinating from stress and lack of sleep. But when I opened my eyes, she was still there, walking across the water toward the platform where I stood. The sacred bridge must be protected, she said, switching to English. Too many come to steal its light for profit. The balance is broken. Who are you? I whispered. I am the guardian who came before. I have waited long for one of the blood to return. She stepped onto the platform, and I felt the temperature drop 20 degrees. You carry the responsibility now, Jennifer Moonfeather. I don't understand. I'm just a park ranger. You are Cherokee. You have the water gift. Your daughters carry it too. She smiled, and it was beautiful and terrible. The choice is yours. Accept the duty or watch more die. Before I could respond, she dissolved back into mist and moonlight, leaving me alone on the platform with my heart pounding and my worldview crumbling. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I got to my house, I found Sarah and Maya sitting on the front porch in their pajamas. "Mama, we had the same dream," Sarah said. "A lady made of water told us you were chosen." Maya nodded. She said, "We have to help you protect the sacred bridge." I knelt down and hugged them both, feeling their small, warm bodies against me. My 8-year-old daughters were having visions about Cherokee water spirits. My scientific training told me this was impossible. My Cherokee blood told me it was inevitable. The Moonbow Guardian was real, and somehow I was next in line. The next few days passed in a blur of normal ranger duties and growing supernatural encounters. I tried to convince myself that stress and exhaustion had caused me to hallucinate the water woman, but the evidence kept mounting that something beyond science was happening at Cumberland Falls. On Thursday, I found 3 more drowning victims. The call came in at dawn. A family of photographers from Nashville, USAD, the Hendersons, had been camping overnight to capture sunrise shots of the falls. When other campers woke up, they found the family's expensive camera equipment arranged neatly on the rocks, but no sign of the people. The search and rescue team found their bodies 2 hours later, floating in a calm pool downstream. All 3 were experienced swimmers. All 3 had been photographing the Moonbow the night before, planning to sell the images to a travel magazine. Dr. Kim met me at the scene. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking. "Jenny, this isn't natural. A family doesn't just decide to go for a midnight swim and all drown together. Something's hunting people." I wanted to argue with him, but I couldn't. The evidence was too clear. The Henderson family had set up their tripods in the exact same spot where Webb died. Their cameras were bone dry, sitting on rocks 20 feet from the water. Their campsite showed no signs of struggle or distress. "We need to close the Moonbow viewing area," I told Tom Bradley when he arrived. "At least until we figure out what's happening." "Close our biggest tourist attraction? Jenny, be reasonable. People come from all over the world to see the Moonbow. We can't shut down based on what? Bad luck? Bad luck doesn't create temperature variations and impossible depth measurements. Bad luck doesn't make entire families drown in shallow water." Tom rubbed his temples. "Look, I'll increase safety patrols. We'll require visitors to register before viewing the Moonbow, but I can't close the falls based on coincidence." That night, I sat my daughters down they'd been acting strange since their shared dream, finishing each other's sentences more than usual, humming Cherokee songs they'd never learned, playing games that involved moving water around in ways that looked almost like magic. "Girls, we need to talk about what's been happening at the falls." Sarah looked at Maya, and they had one of their silent twin conversations. Then Sarah spoke for both of them. "The water lady is getting stronger, Mama. More people are going to die if you don't help her." "Help her?" "Sarah, people are dying. That's not helping anyone." Maya shook her head. "People are dying because they're taking sacred light without permission. The water lady is protecting what's hers." I felt a chill run down my spine. These were my 8-year-old daughters, talking about supernatural murder like it was playground justice. "How do you know all this?" "She talks to us in our dreams," Sarah said. "She shows us the old ways, when Cherokee people knew how to respect the water spirits." "And she's teaching us," Maya added. "Watch." She held her hands over her glass of water, concentrating hard. The water began to swirl, forming a miniature whirlpool. Then Sarah joined in, and the water rose up in a tiny waterspout, spinning in the air above the glass. I grabbed their hands, breaking the connection. The water splashed back down. "Don't do that again. Not until we understand what's happening." But I was terrified. My daughters were manifesting abilities that shouldn't exist, and they were getting instruction from a spirit that was drowning people. What kind of mother does that make me? What kind of choice was I facing? The answer came Friday night. I was doing my final patrol when I heard screaming from the Moonbow viewing area. I ran toward the sound, my flashlight beam dancing ahead of me. On the platform, I found a young couple from the University of Kentucky. The woman was hysterical, pointing at the water. "She just walked out there. She said she needed to get the perfect shot for her photography portfolio. The water grabbed her." I looked where she was pointing and saw her friend thrashing in the middle of the pool, maybe 30 feet from shore. But something was wrong with the way she was moving. It looked like invisible hands were pulling her under, then letting her surface, then pulling her down again. I grabbed my rescue rope and started toward the water, but the woman grabbed my arm. "Don't go in there. There's something in the water. I saw it." "What did you see?" "A woman made of light." She rose up out of the moonbow and just took her. I could see the drowning girl was weakening. In another minute, she'd go under for good. I kicked off my boots and dove into the pool. The water was freezing cold, much colder than my thermometer readings had shown. Worse, it felt thick, like trying to swim through syrup. Every stroke was a struggle, and I could feel something fighting against me, trying to keep me from reaching the victim. When I was halfway there, I felt a hand grab my ankle. I looked down and saw her, the moonbow guardian, floating beneath me in the dark water. Her face was beautiful and terrible, glowing with the same light as the moonbow above us. "She seeks to steal sacred light for profit," the guardian said, her voice echoing strangely underwater. "Like the others, this is justice." "She's just a kid," I managed to say, somehow able to speak underwater. "She doesn't know about the sacred site. Ignorance is not innocence. The old laws still hold." I could see the college student going under again, her strength almost gone. I had seconds to act. What if I take responsibility for her? What if I accept the guardian role you've been trying to give me? The spirit's grip on my ankle tightened. "You would bind yourself to the sacred duty? Protect the moonbow bridge from those who would profane it?" I thought about my daughters, about their strange new abilities, about the choice I'd been avoiding for a week. Yes, but no more killing. We find another way to protect the falls. The guardian smiled, and suddenly the water around me became warm and buoyant. I shot toward the surface, reaching the drowning student with ease. The water itself seemed to help me pull her toward shore, and within minutes we were both on dry land. The college student coughed up water and looked around in confusion. "What happened?" "I was just trying to get a good angle for my shot and then—" "Equipment malfunction," I told her. "Your camera flash reflected off the water and disoriented you. These things happen. But you need to leave now, and don't come back to photograph the moonbow." She nodded, still shaken, and let her friend help her back to their car. When they were gone, I found myself alone on the platform. The moonbow stretched across the falls, brighter than I'd ever seen it. And standing in the middle of it was the guardian, no longer threatening but somehow expectant. "You have accepted the responsibility," she said. "Now you must learn the old ways." "What does that mean exactly?" "You will know when someone approaches the sacred waters with wrong intentions. You will have the power to turn them away, to protect the bridge between worlds. And your daughters will learn as well. They carry the gift strongly. And if I refuse? If I change my mind?" Her expression grew sad. "Then the old curse continues. Those who profit from sacred light will continue to drown. The choice has always been yours, Jennifer Moonfeather." I looked at the falls, at the moonbow, at the place my Cherokee ancestors had considered sacred for generations. I thought about my daughters and their growing abilities, about my responsibility as a park ranger to protect people, about the 19 bodies we'd pulled from these waters. "Teach me," I said. The guardian smiled and stepped forward, reaching out her hand. When I took it, knowledge flooded through me like a river. Generations of Cherokee water lore, the true history of Cumberland Falls, the responsibilities and powers of the moonbow guardian. I understood now. The moonbow wasn't just a beautiful natural phenomenon. It really was a bridge between the physical world and the spirit realm, and it needed protection from those who would commercialize and cheapen its sacred nature. But it also needed a guardian who could find balance, someone who could protect the sacred while still allowing people to experience its wonder. I was that guardian now, and everything was about to change. The real test came 2 weeks later, during the October full moon. Word had spread through photography forums about the perfect moonbow conditions at Cumberland Falls, and we had the biggest crowd of moonbow watchers I'd ever seen. Over 200 people, most of them carrying expensive camera equipment and talking about selling their shots to stock photo companies. I stood on the viewing platform, watching the crowd with my new supernatural senses. It was like having a second layer of vision. I could see the people's intentions as clearly as their faces. The family from Ohio who just wanted to show their kids something magical. They glowed with a soft, warm light. The nature lovers who planned to frame their photos for their living room, same gentle glow. But the commercial photographers, the ones planning to profit from the sacred moonbow, they were surrounded by a dark, hungry shadow that made my skin crawl. There were 43 of them in the crowd. 43 people who the moonbow guardian would consider legitimate targets for the ancient curse. I touched the Cherokee water stone I now wore around my neck, feeling its connection to the spirit realm. Through it, I could sense the guardian's presence in the falls, growing, stronger as the moon reached its peak. She was preparing to act. My daughters were with me, as they had been every night since I accepted the guardian role. They could see the dark shadows too, and I watched their faces grow worried as they counted the commercial photographers. "Mama," Sarah whispered, "there are too many. The water lady is getting angry." Maya nodded. "She's going to call up a big wave to wash them all away. We have to stop her." Through my connection to the guardian spirit, I felt her rage building. These people had come to steal sacred light, to turn the moonbow into a commodity. In her mind, they all deserved the fate of the previous victims. But I couldn't let that happen. I was a park ranger first, and my job was to protect people, even people who didn't understand what they were messing with. I made my decision. "Sarah, Maya, I need you to help me. We're going to try something your great-grandmother taught me through the guardians: memories." I led them down to the water's edge, away from the crowd. The moonbow was at its brightest, a perfect arc of silver light stretching across the falls. In its center, I could see the guardian waiting, her form more solid than I'd ever seen it before. "Guardian," I called out, speaking in Cherokee as she had taught me. "I claim the right of balance." She turned toward us, her expression stern. "Too many violate the sacred space. They must be stopped." "I agree, but not through death. Let me try the old way, the way of teaching rather than punishment." The guardian's eyes flashed with something between anger and curiosity. "You think you can turn their hearts from greed to respect? 43 souls corrupted by the hunger for profit? I think I can try, and if I succeed, you'll never need to drown anyone again. The moonbow will be protected through understanding, not fear." She was quiet for a long moment, and I could feel the spiritual pressure building around us. The temperature dropped, and mist began rising from the water in unnatural patterns. "You have until the moon reaches its peak," she said finally. "If you fail, I take them all." I looked up at the moon. Maybe 20 minutes until it reached its highest point. 20 minutes to somehow convince 43 commercial photographers to give up their profit plans and treat the moonbow as a sacred site. It seemed impossible, but I had help. "Girls, remember what I taught you about the Cherokee water ceremony? About showing people the true spirit of a place?" They nodded, their faces serious beyond their 8 years. "We're going to do that now, but bigger than we've ever tried before. Are you ready?" Sarah and Maya joined hands, then took mine. Together, we waded into the shallow water at the edge of the pool. I could feel the guardian's presence surrounding us, lending us her power. I began to sing an old Cherokee water song my grandmother had taught me, one that honored the spirits of rivers and falls. My daughters joined in, their young voices blending with mine. The song rose over the crowd's chatter, and one by one, people began to quiet and listen. As we sang, something magical happened. The moonbow began to change. Instead of just a simple arc of light, it started showing images, visions of what this place had been before European settlers arrived. The crowd saw Cherokee families coming to the falls for ceremonies, warriors receiving spiritual guidance from the water spirits, children learning the sacred songs that kept the balance between worlds. The commercial photographers lowered their cameras, transfixed by the vision. They were seeing the true history of Cumberland Falls, understanding for the first time that this wasn't just a scenic spot, it was a sacred site with centuries of spiritual significance. But the vision was taking everything we had. I could feel my strength draining away, and the daughters were trembling with exhaustion. We had maybe 5 more minutes before we collapsed. That's when the guardian made her choice. Instead of fighting us, she joined the ceremony. Her voice rose with ours, singing in the ancient Cherokee language, and suddenly the moonbow exploded with light and sound. Every person on the viewing platform experienced the same vision at the same time, a shared understanding of the sacred nature of this place. The commercial photographers began putting their cameras away. One by one, they approached the water's edge and spoke words of respect and apology. Some left offerings of tobacco or stones. Others simply stood in silent reverence. By the time the moon reached its peak, the entire atmosphere had changed. Instead of a crowd of exploiters, we had 200 people participating in an impromptu ceremony of respect for the sacred moonbow. The guardian stepped out of the falls, no longer terrible but beautiful, glowing with peaceful moonlight. She spoke to the crowd in a voice that somehow everyone could understand, regardless of language. "This place is sacred to the Cherokee people," she said. "The moonbow is a bridge between worlds, a gift from the Creator that should be honored, not commercialized. You may witness its beauty, you may share its wonder with others, but do not seek to profit from sacred light." One of the photographers, a middle-aged man from Tennessee, stepped forward. "We understand now. We didn't know. How can we help protect this place?" The guardian smiled and looked at me. "Ask the living guardian. She will teach you the proper ways." As the moon began to set and the moonbow faded, the crowd dispersed quietly. Many of them stopped to thank me, to ask how they could learn more about Cherokee traditions, to promise they would spread the word about treating the falls with respect. When everyone was gone, the guardian approached me one last time. "You have chosen wisely," she said. "The balance is restored. The sacred bridge is protected through understanding rather than fear." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you teach. You help others understand the sacred nature of this place. And when your time comes, you will pass the knowledge to your daughters." She began to fade back into the moonlight and mist. "Guardian, wait, what's your name? I should know the name of the one who came before." She paused, half dissolved into light. "I was called Morning Star. I died in 1838, trying to protect the falls as my people were forced to leave. I have waited long for one of the blood to return." Then she was gone, leaving only the natural moonbow arcing through the mist. That was 3 months ago. Since then, everything has changed at Cumberland Falls. We haven't had a single drowning incident. The Park Service, working with the Cherokee Nation, has established new protocols for moonbow viewing that emphasize the cultural and the spiritual significance of the site. Visitors now receive information about Cherokee history and the sacred nature of the falls before they're allowed to view the moonbow. My daughters are learning traditional Cherokee ways alongside their regular schooling. They can control water in small ways, making streams flow uphill, creating perfect circles on the surface of still pools, even generating tiny moonbows in sunlight. I'm teaching them to use these gifts responsibly, to see themselves as protectors rather than performers. As for me, I'm still a park ranger, but my job description has expanded considerably. I'm now the official cultural liaison between the Park Service and the Cherokee Nation. I teach classes about Cherokee water traditions, lead moonbow viewing ceremonies, and help visitors understand the difference between appreciating sacred sites and exploiting them. The guardian spirit still visits occasionally, usually when the moonbow is at its brightest. She no longer appears as a threatening figure of death and judgment, but as a teacher and guide. Through her, I've learned water ceremonies that have been lost for generations, stories that help people understand the spiritual nature of natural places. Most importantly, the balance has been restored. The moonbow appears more frequently now and more brilliantly. People come from around the world to witness it, but they come with respect rather than greed. Many leave offerings at the water's edge: tobacco, stones, prayers for protection of sacred places. I've been contacted by other Native American park rangers dealing with similar situations. Apparently, there are guardian spirits at sacred sites across the country, all waiting for someone with the blood and the calling to step forward. It seems my story is part of a larger awakening, a return to understanding that some places are too sacred to be treated as mere tourist attractions. But late at night, when I'm alone on the viewing platform during my patrols, I sometimes feel the guardian's presence in the water. She's watching, waiting, making sure the sacred laws are still being followed. And I know that if people ever forget the lessons we've learned, if they go back to treating the moonbow as nothing more than a photo opportunity, she'll be ready to protect it in the old way. The Cherokee water spirits don't forgive twice. So if you ever find yourself at Cumberland Falls during a full moon, watching that impossible arc of silver light stretch across the mist, remember this: you're not just seeing a natural phenomenon. You're witnessing a bridge between worlds, a sacred gift that has been protected by the Cherokee for centuries. Approach with respect, take only memories, leave only gratitude, and never, ever try to profit from sacred light. The Moonbow Guardian is always watching,